IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Wednesday, November 22nd. So that means two things are true today, people. Number one, it's midweek rundown time. We're going to have some fun talking about some different topics today. And then number two, we're a day away from Thanksgiving. So I'm excited about it. I got my Gap Closers shirt on because I'm going to talk about some Gap Closers today on the current Notre Dame team. We're going to talk a little recruiting today, some Gap Closers to discuss there. And I'm just kind of fired up today. I'm just in a pretty good, not feeling great, but physically still kind of got this cough I'm dealing with. So I'll appreciate and welcome any patience that you guys show with me today in regard to some pauses I may have to take. And but feeling great as far as spiritually and emotionally and mentally. I'm fired up. I'm ready for this game on Saturday. I'm excited to hang out with y'all. Ryan's going to record a recruiting show later tonight. He actually just did an interview with a big time prospect that's going to be part of that show. We're going to publish that tomorrow. Then he and I are going to do our keys to victory and prediction show on Friday. So the recruiting show won't be live this week. We'll publish that tomorrow. And on the podcast platform, I'm also going to publish the mailbag tomorrow. Been kind of holding off on that since it was so long, just kind of putting that up on Thanksgiving for people to have. If they're driving around or going to visit family, you'll have some stuff to listen to on the way there and the way back. So very, very excited about all that, and just jacked up, man. And so, yes, and Brandon Pleasant, it is an uncommitted prospect, so it's not Cree Thomas. It's an uncommitted player that he interviewed, and he'll have that out tomorrow. So I'm excited about this weekend. As I told y'all, Thanksgiving's always a fun time. Obviously, thinking about what I'm thankful for, and just different things that have me pretty jazzed up. And I'm not traveling this weekend, so I'll be able to enjoy the leftovers for several days. My wife and I always get a really big turkey. We got like a 20-pound turkey, and it's just the two of us because we'll have Thanksgiving dinner for like 3-4 straight days. Just keep having it over and over again. So very, very excited about that. And so it'll be Brandon. It's not a secret. I'll tell you who it was. It was Ivan Taylor. He interviewed Ivan Taylor. We'll have that show as part of the recruiting show tomorrow. Just talking about where he is and how the visits went and all that kind of stuff. So Ryan's got a good relationship with Ivan, so he decided to join the show and just kind of give the latest on what's going on with him as well. So today's topics, I'm going to talk about number one. We're going to dive into the matchups that matter, have our sort of our normal show. And then part two of today's show is again, I'm not going to do necessarily who needs to step up and those kind of things, because again, Stanford's not good. They shouldn't need guys to step up necessarily in this kind of matchup. But I'm going to dive into just a little bit of a continuation of what we talked about last week. Things that I want to see from the Notre Dame offense that are going to signify to me that there's a strong finish. Because I was talking yesterday about my buddy who was not a big fan of the Jared Parker hire, and loved what he saw from the offense the first 4 games, and then the last month after that kind of soured him on it and got him back to feeling like it was a mistake hire. But the conversations he and I have had, he's in show me mode, which is very fair. But he said, look, like I can have my opinion changed, and I can have my opinion changed somewhat this year. And his thing is he's just looking for a reason to kind of be excited. And he's looking for a reason to stay engaged this offseason with the team. And a big reason why he's not is because, again, it's like we're having the same conversation over and over and over and over again, year after year after year. Is this the year that the Notre Dame offense finally is good enough for this team to contend for a title? And he's got a very fair point. But there are things that we can see from this offense, as we talked about, down the stretch, and it's unique to each opponent. They're going to tell us, hey, yes, there were some struggles. Yes, that they're not there yet, but they took a step forward. That there's reason to be optimistic. And so we'll talk about that a little bit. And then I'm going to kind of talk a little bit too about, as part of that, what I'm kind of looking for in a bowl matchup that's going to help continue to show me that this offense has turned the corner. Because, guys, you're going to see in the numbers, I mean, the defense is elite. They have a championship caliber defense. There's no question about it, in my opinion. But the offense just wasn't good enough in enough big moments this season. And so I'll break down kind of what I want to see over the next couple games. Because, Brandon, the thing about I see your response. I'm not on the, I'm not on your page. Right. But the thing that I would say is what I'm hoping that a lot of Notre Dame fans are is, again, be frustrated by what you've seen, but at the same time, be willing to have your opinion changed, but based on what we saw. And again, with Stanford, it won't be about the final score because Stanford's not good. It'll be about how they play. I'll dive into that. And then the third part of today's show, and I'm hoping my voice lasts long enough to get to that, is going to be diving into some recruiting. I'm going to talk some recruiting today. I'm going to talk about the 2025 secondary class. Obviously, Notre Dame just kicked off their 25 secondary class with Cree Thomas. So I'm going to share my thoughts on Cree. Look at a little bit of film of Cree. I know Ryan broke him down the other day, did a great job breaking him down with Sean Stiers on Monday when he committed, but I'm going to kind of share my thoughts. And then I'm going to talk about kind of where the board is in the secondary right now, who Notre Dame is on right now, and sort of what the dream finish is for Notre Dame. Really, the dream finish is just landing the guys on the board. It really is. And just dive into who I like, and we'll watch a little bit of film and dive into that. No mailbag today. If you guys want to throw in, if you have some questions that you need to get answered today, knowing that we can't answer them tomorrow and won't really be able to answer them again until Friday, go ahead and throw those super chats in there. I'll get to those, but I'm not going to do a formal mailbag today. But I did want to start with this from David Prevo with a super chat. He says, "Happy Thanksgiving, IB Nation." And I thank you for saying that, David, and absolutely with you, man. Absolutely. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And then Raymond Harton also, happy early Thanksgiving. Safe travels to all. Go Irish, beat Stanford. So I want to thank you two guys for getting those super chats in early. Just a reminder, too, when we go from segment to segment, I will put up the IB theme song just to kind of help me get my notes prepared and kind of transition from one segment to the other. So when you see that, don't go away. I'll be right back in about a minute. Just excited to kind of get to it. So you guys ready to get started? Let's roll here on topic number one. To begin, we're going to do what we always do, right? We're going to dive into the matchups that matter. And really, the matchups that matter in this game to me, we'll start with the offense. We'll kind of dive into each matchup and just kind of go over some numbers, and then I'll finish up each segment, with a look at the matchup to me that's most important, either to the game or the one that I'm most interested in. And in this particular one, it's not so much about the one that's most important as the one that, as far as winning and losing, but it's the one that I think is the most interesting and the one that have the highest pressure on. So let's just look at the offense first, the defense, and guys and gals, you're going to see it. I mean, Stanford's just not good. They're really not good, and these numbers show it. Notre Dame offensively this season ranks 4th in scoring, 46th in yards per game, but they're 10th in yards per play. Those numbers are kind of interesting. And when you look at Notre Dame's rushing, I'll get into that as well. Part of the reason that Notre Dame ranks where they rank is because when you look at the number of plays they've run this year, they rank very low in total number of plays. Notre Dame ranks 122nd in total number of plays. Why is that? Well, part of it is they've gotten short fields this year. That's what happens when you have a great defense. They've gotten a number of short fields. They've been a bit of a slower moving offense. They go at a slower pace, which we've talked about, and just the way that the defense plays and the way that the games have gone, Notre Dame, the games don't last very long. That's just really what it boils down to. And those are things that kind of look into it. So like the numbers overall, the numbers for Notre Dame this season don't look necessarily great from a total yard standpoint, but when you look at some of the particulars of it, and the other thing is Notre Dame's in a lot more of a big play offense this season, which you see down there. Notre Dame's much more of a big play offense this year, but they rank 10th in yards per play. They're 59th in third down offense, which is up from last week after having a very good third down performance against Wake Forest. I would argue this is one of the better third down performances that Notre Dame has had this season when you take into context not just the success. They've had better games success-wise. They had better numbers against Navy. They had a similar completion percentage rate against Ohio State and Pittsburgh, but it was more about there just was intentionality to what they were doing instead of just running plays and they work or they don't. There was purpose to what they were doing on third down in this game, which was a change, which I was happy about. I was very happy to see that. And hopefully that continues against Stanford this weekend. And as you can see, Stanford has the second to worst third down defense in college football. I mean, their third down defense is just not very good. Notre Dame ranks 26th in red zone offense. They rank 19th in red zone touchdown offense, both very good numbers. They are 26th in big plays this season, which when you really dive into Notre Dame, there have been times this season when the offense has been exactly what I want it to be, efficient and explosive. We saw that against Wake Forest. We saw that to a degree against Pittsburgh, minus the turnovers. We saw it in the first 4 games. The problem in the middle of the season is they tended to be sort of boom or bust. They'd rip off some big plays and they put like a couple really nice drives together, but then there was a lot of 3 and outs, 4 and outs, 5 and outs where they just couldn't put drives together with any kind of consistency. And that's going to kind of factor into the number of plays as well. When you have bouts where you are not moving the chains, you're not converting third downs. Because prior to the Wake Forest game, they were in the 30% range on third down. That's really bad. And you're not moving the chains. But when you're a big play offense, you're going to have more success there. And when you look at the Notre Dame offense compared to past seasons, and you look at plays of 30 yards or more, as I mentioned, Notre Dame's 26th in the country right now with 29 plays of 30 yards or more. Last season in 13 games, they only had 25 plays of 30 yards or more. And this season also, they have 16 plays of 40 yards or more. Last season, Notre Dame only had 6 plays of 40 yards or more. Last season, they only had 3 plays of 50 yards or more. This season, Notre Dame has 6 plays of 50 yards or more. They actually have 5 plays of 60 yards or more this season. Compared to last season, the Notre Dame offense had no plays that went beyond 60 yards. This season, Notre Dame has 5 plays that went 60 yards or more. They've had 3 plays that went 70 yards or more, and then obviously 1 play that went over 80 yards this season. So that would have been the touchdown run against NC State for Modric Estimate early in the season. But we have seen part of it is a much more big play offense from this Notre Dame team this year, and that's going to factor into the number of plays being down as well. When you look at turnovers, Notre Dame has not been a big turnover team. They rank 38th in the country, which is not great. The problem for Notre Dame this season when it comes to turnovers is offensively, and this is going to be important for this game, is they have turned the ball over in bunches this season. And that's something they're going to have to avoid in this game. Because if you look at Notre Dame, pretty good, 13th in the country in turnovers, but they have only turned the ball over in 6 of their 11 games. They've had 5 games they didn't turn the ball over at all. Their only loss in that was to Ohio State, but against Louisville, 5 turnovers, against Clemson, 3 turnovers. So 8 of their 13 turnovers came in 2 games, and both were losses. And obviously you can't have that. They had a turnover this past week against Wake, but that was a garbage turnover. You had the 2 early turnovers against Pittsburgh, which obviously hurt that offense. You had the early turnover against NC State, which stalled the offense a little bit and helped NC State kind of have a couple nice little drives early on. But overall, Notre Dame has been good at protecting the ball. They just have to make sure that against a team like Stanford that they don't have those turnovers and bunches type of situations. Real quick, David Jones, last week's touchdown to Jaden Greathouse was 48 yards, not 58 yards. But when you look at Stanford, I mean, they're not good. They rank 129th in scoring defense, 130th in total yards, in total defense, which is yards allowed per game. They rank 123rd. There's 133 teams, keep in mind. 123rd in yards per play allowed, over 6.4. They're 132nd in third down defense, which again is why I say Notre Dame needs to get their third down offense right. I'll talk more about that later. 61st in red zone defense, but 125th in red zone defense, which means when teams get into the end zone, they are scoring touchdowns at a very high rate. 88th in big plays allowed, most big plays allowed of 30 yards or more, and they've only forced 7 turnovers all season. So again, just not a very effective defense for Stanford, and they've really struggled in a lot of ways. Now, the interesting thing when you look at Stanford, and you kind of dive into the numbers, you could argue it's a little bit worse than you think, and it really is. And I'll give you some examples of what I'm talking about here. The numbers are low. I talked about how the numbers are low. They've had a couple games that have really, I would say not really, but inflated their numbers a little bit. You look at their performance against Hawaii, who's not a very good football team. They held Hawaii to -5 rushing yards. They only gave up 350 yards in that game. They held Washington State's offense, who is really struggling right now, like really struggling, to 245 yards. It was Washington State's third game of under 250 yards of offense this season. They played Arizona early when Arizona was struggling and gave up only 349 yards. But since the Arizona game, you have the anomaly of Washington State, where they held them to 4 yards of 4 yards rushing, 3.8 yards per play. But since the Arizona game, so that's back on September 3rd, Stanford has gone 2-5 in those games. They have losses of by 36, 35, 9, 45, and 12. They've given up 506, 532, 503, 460, 598, and 455 yards. They've only held opponents during that stretch. You have the Washington State game. Is the only time they've held an opponent under 5.4, and in only 2 other games they hold an opponent under 6. And that was UCLA, who went for 5.7, in this past week with Cal, who went for 5.4. So just, again, overall, just a bad defense consistently is where they are. When you look at the next area, let's go to the Notre Dame rush offense against the Stanford rush defense. This is an area where, again, you see Notre Dame's total yards numbers are a little bit misleading. They're not a great rushing team at all, but you see the other numbers are show that Notre Dame's more effective than what you would expect a team that ranks 100 or 60th in college football in rushing yards. And when you dive into the numbers, again, you see what I'm talking about. This season, Notre Dame ranks 60th in total yards per game, but they rank 102nd in total rush attempts this season. So they rank 25th in yards per attempt at 5.0 yards per attempt. And they rank 15th in fewest tackles for loss allowed, which is a good number, obviously. And then Notre Dame has had some moments where they've been a big play rushing offense. They have 18 rushes this season of 20 yards or more, which is, again, a good number, and ranks Notre Dame, what would be 30th this season. Now, the key the concern has been that they haven't been able to rip off those type of runs against the better teams on the schedule. And that's a very fair discussion, but doesn't really matter here because Stanford is not that team. And again, when you look at it compared to past seasons, Notre Dame has 18 gains of 20 yards or more this season. That already matches last season's total, which they did in 13 games. Last year, Notre Dame had 4 carries of 30 yards or more, only 4 on the season. They had 2 carries of 40 yards or more and only 1 carry of 50 yards or more last season. This year, 2023, as I said, Notre Dame's already matched the 20-yard carries, but they've already doubled them up in 30-yard carries. They have 8. Notre Dame has 3 carries of 40 yards or more this season, 2 of 50 yards or more this season, and then one of 60 or plus. They had the 80-yard touchdown run against NC State, as I mentioned. So this is another area where you see that Notre Dame has been a very good, very efficient run team, even though they haven't been a bulk run team. And I think, I'll be honest, I think the rushing offense for Notre Dame this year, there's some numbers that look good. There's some numbers that are solid numbers. But overall, I think the run game has been very disappointing for me this season. And it just has. And you look at, your quarterback has not given you a whole lot, but you didn't bring him in to give you a whole lot. And I think there were some opportunities to be better running the football this year. There have been some questionable personnel decisions at times with playing certain guys that aren't overly efficient runners, in my view. But when you look at the 3 backs in like the primary 3 backs that have had the most success this season, and that's Audric Estime, Jeremiah Love, and Jadarian Price, and you look at their overall production, it tells a little bit of a different story, but not a completely different story. And again, when you look at how you break them down into into the bigger games, that's where the issue for me has been. But when you look at the top three backs, Audric Estime, Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, they have averaged actually 5.8. Let's see here, 5.875, so 5.9 yards per carry this season. So the backs have been good when given the opportunities, and when the line has played just okay. The backs have been very good. The problem is the lines have just kind of gotten their butts whooped a little bit too often. Played well last week. We'll see how they do against Stanford. Stanford's got a very unique rush defense. They're an interesting team, to be honest with you, rush defense wise, because as I broke down yesterday, their numbers aren't bad. They're not too far off from where the Notre Dame run defense is. If we're being completely honest, they've given up 143.9 yards per game, 4.3 yards per carry. Notre Dame's given up 127.5 and 3.6. So they're not too far off from where Notre Dame is. Notre Dame's clearly better, but not too far off. There's a couple reasons for that. I don't think their run defense is as good as these numbers reflect. They've had two games that really changed the numbers. They held Hawaii to -5 yards, and they gave up only 4 yards to Washington State. But in other games, they gave up 180 to USC, 169 to Sacramento State, 208 to Oregon, 221 to UCLA, 277 to Oregon State, 161 to Cal. They gave up 132 to Colorado. But if you look at Colorado, that's way above their average. Colorado's only averaging 71.8 yards per game this year, 3.2 yards per carry. They went for 132 yards and 3.8 yards per carry against Stanford. So again, with context, that's not very good. And so their rush defense has been, in my opinion, at best okay, in my view. And so when I look at Notre Dame, this is a matchup that they should thrive in. When you break down the film, you see a couple things about the Stanford run game. Number one, they're very undersized. I was looking at some of the numbers of their defensive linemen and writing some of these down, and their linebackers. They line up. Stanford lines up in a I'm going to see if I can pull this clip up here. They line up a lot of different ways. They're primarily a 3 down front, and when you look at them this way, let me get that a little bit bigger. When you look at Stanford, they've kind of lined up in 2 different ways this year, in my opinion. You'll see against some teams, you'll see kind of spread out, balanced look. But I think the UCLA and Oregon State games, to me, if you want to really get an idea of whoops. So let's try that again. All right. So this is what I was trying to show. If you look at Stanford, they have shown different looks against different teams. I think the UCLA and the Oregon State games are probably the 2 best films to watch if you want to get a better idea of what Stanford's going to look like against Notre Dame, where they're more of a true 3-4 type of look. This is against UCLA. You see 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, 2 backs, under center. You're going to get a little bit of an idea of kind of this is how they're going to look. 5 guys up front, bringing the linebackers down. You've got a safety down. I think we're going to see more of this when Notre Dame's in 12 and 13 personnel. And then they'll do some of their other things where they'll drop guys back and go to their nickel personnel when Notre Dame goes 11. So you'll see Stanford sort of personnel match against teams, and they'll do that against Notre Dame. But we're going to see a lot of this type of look against Stanford, in my opinion. And so when you break down that part of the matchup, to me, you see a team that here. Let's get to this here real fast. I'm going to pull this back up. When you look at Stanford, you're going to see a team that is going to try to line up and just eat up space with their front, but they're not real big. This is what I was kind of talking about. Their starting D line, depending on who plays. Franklin is a regular starter. He's 281. They have three other kids that play inside: Moy, Phillips, and Bucky. They're 301, 295, 260. They're 6'2, 6'3, 6'3, 6'3 across the board. They're not very long. Height doesn't really determine that. Length does. They're not really long. They're edge players. Kennelly is 6'4, 250. Abar, I don't think he played the most recent game. Abar is 6'2", 252. Tevarua Tavidi is 6'2", 235. David Bailey's only 6'3", 240. So just not real big. And then there are two inside linebackers. There's two starting inside linebackers. There's 6'1". Bernadelle is 6'1", 227. And then Tristan Sinclair is 6'1", 221. So they're not a very big defense, but they compete. And that's the thing I do like about this group is they're not real big. Their front's not super athletic outside of a couple guys. Bailey's a pretty decent athlete. Tafidi's a decent athlete. David Bay's a really good athlete. Tafidi's a decent athlete. They're undersized, though. They're both undersized. They can be driven back. They can be pushed around, in my opinion, on the edges. But their inside guys really do a nice job of battling and competing. And what they're going to try to do is just eat up blocks. They're a two-gap, three-down defense. They're going to try to eat up blocks. And so what Notre Dame's got to be able to do is be more physical, have really good combo blocks, get to the second level. Their linebackers make themselves blockable in these games, from what I've seen. And when I watch their linebackers, they'll over pursue a lot. They'll just get themselves out of position. But teams have had a lot of success, and this is going to be interesting because Notre Dame needs to run their duo and their inside zone. No doubt. There's going to be stuff there. Duo especially, I think they could have some success with, bouncing it outside in this game. And I think there's going to be some really nice cutback lanes on the inside zone. I mean, I think Oregon twice cut an inside zone all the way back outside for big gains. And those will be parts. Those will be things that I want to see. But also teams have had a lot of success running outside zone and counters and gap schemes against Stanford as well. And Notre Dame has been kind of hit or miss when it comes to those concepts. At times they've been really good with those concepts. I mean, they crushed NC State with those concepts. They ran all over Central Michigan with those concepts. But they struggled mightily running those concepts against Duke. They struggled mightily running those concepts against Louisville. First half, they had a great success running those concepts against Clemson. Clemson adjust, and they couldn't get it going. So they're going to have to mix up their run game a little bit better than we've seen in past games, and even more so than what we saw against Wake Forest. They can still be a inside zone duo-based team, no doubt, but they're going to have to mix up some of their looks and be able to effectively use some of their gap schemes, whether that be power counter or whether that be the more traditional, G scheme type stuff, buck sweeps, the true gap off tackle gap plays. The other thing the teams have had some success against is if you can properly formation Stanford, where you can kind of get a nice pin on the outside, you can quickly pitch the ball and get outside of them because they just don't have a lot of lateral speed. And if your perimeter receivers can block effectively, you can have some success running the ball. So there's a lot of things that Notre Dame can do there. And I'll just leave it here. I'll give you this little teaser before I transition to the next part. I want to see Notre Dame come out and show a willingness to go at Stanford running the football early. Stanford's got a very bad pass defense, and I'll get into that. But it's good for them to come out and show a willingness to run early, number one. And number two, I have a feeling that Notre Dame is going to try to come out early and get some big plays for Audric Estime because of the Doak Walker stuff. I think there's going to be sort of we're going to show you how bad you screwed up type of mentality, which I don't hate, to be honest with you. And here's why I say that. And this is something I'm talking about here, not in the what I want to see from the offense thing as much. But we haven't seen this offensive line really bully anybody in a while. And Stanford is not a team that can be bullied. When they get run on, it's usually because they lack athleticism, they get out leveraged, they just don't have talented players, but they play hard. And I would actually like to see Notre Dame come out and show the ability to out physical Stanford. Now, I don't want it to turn into a pure bully ball where you're just running it all day situation, but I do want to see Notre Dame come out early, get Audric going early, because I think that's going to set up some other stuff, which I'm going to talk about here next. So this is the matchup to me that is most intriguing for me. And look, here's where I'm at. Again, numbers, they're not good. Stanford ranks 132nd out of 133 teams in most yards allowed per game. They're 97th in yards allowed per completion, 121st in yards per attempt. They have that's actually supposed to say 132nd in touchdown passes allowed. They've given up 30, which ranks 132nd. They've only picked off 6 passes. They rank 124th in completion percentage allowed. They rank 130th in pass efficiency defense, and they rank 100th in most big plays of 30 yards. They've given up 20 plays this year of 30 yards or more in the pass game. They really struggle defending the pass. And there's some, but it's really kind of interesting when you break down the film, because they're not great on the outside at corner. They're really not. But when you look at them, there's a couple things they really particularly struggle with. And yes, winning one-on-ones, and there are some shots that Notre Dame needs to take. I mean, I'm watching Bo Nix and I'm watching DJ Uiagalelei. Just they've got to step on a guy, but they're just unwilling to kind of let it go. Sam Hartman needs to be willing to let those throws go. I think there's some things they can do with the tight ends over the middle of the field, the receivers on deep overs and over the middle of the field, the seam. I mean, I could see some post routes and some seam routes by Chris Tyree, Jordan Faison, maybe Jaden Greathouse in this game that could really go for some big plays. And as I mentioned, also the tight ends. I think there's some interesting stuff they can do backside of trips if they put a tight end backside of trips. With some just straight go routes. I mean, I would literally line up Eli Raridan or Cooper Flanagan on the backside of trips and, have some runs, and then just have them run a corner, a go, a backside post, something like that, and just take advantage of their size backside. There's some things that you can do there as well. But there's 2 other things that they do. Number one is they struggle, in my opinion, with post-snap switch concepts, which I'd like to see some of Notre Dame in this game. But the other thing is this, and I called Ryan before the show, and I was like, dude, like, am I wrong here? Is this not the worst play action defense you've ever seen in your life? And I kind of joked with him. And he was like, yeah, they're really bad at defending play action. I mean, they're really bad at defending play action, even as their most recent games. They bite really hard because they're an aggressive run defense, but they're also not a very good run defense, and they know it. And so when they see play action, they come down hard against teams that are actually good at running the ball. Now, their play action defense isn't terrible against some of the teams they play, but against Oregon, it was bad. Against USC, it was bad. Against Washington, it wasn't. It was okay, but Washington doesn't run the ball a whole lot. It was bad against UCLA. It was bad against Oregon State, because 2 things: their linebackers come down a lot, and their safeties come down a lot. And the thing about their safeties is they're not real fast. And if they get caught coming down, Notre Dame's got the kind of speed to get over top. So that's why I talked about earlier. I do want to see Notre Dame come out and establish the run game early, because if Notre Dame can come out and move the chains running the football, get Audric going, get Jeremiah Love going, get Jadarian Price going, like get all 3 of those guys involved early in the game, but especially Audric, that's going to force Stanford to kind of go big. And I brought up that play earlier, or that formation earlier. Let me just pull it up again so I can give you guys an example of what I'm talking about here. So when you look at Stanford here, I'm going to give you 2 different looks from Stanford in this game. So here's one particular look early down. This is out of 12 personnel, 2 receivers, 1 back, 2 tight ends. And you can see they're in their sort of their 5 down look, 2 linebacker look. The safety's creeping downhill, because UCLA is, again, like Notre Dame, a team that likes to run the football. UCLA is a team that their offense is built on first and foremost establishing the run. UCLA this year is averaging 202.1 yards per game, but they're 4.9 yards per carry. So they're more yards than Notre Dame because they run it a lot more than Notre Dame, but they're fewer yards per carry. Not by a lot. They're good at their yards per carry number is good at 4.9, but they're a heavy run team. When you look at other teams that Stanford has played this year, again, we're talking about teams that run the ball effectively. The teams that I'm talking about that have been able to have success against Stanford throwing the football is, as I mentioned, UCLA is one. Oregon State this past week had some big play action hits in that game. And they ran for 277 yards per game against Stanford. They're averaging 192.5 on the season, 5.2 per carry. So very similar to Notre Dame in regard to yards per carry average. Notre Dame's kind of right in the middle of those two teams. And then you've got Oregon, who's 195 yards per game, but they're at 6 yards a carry. Again, another team that early in the game, Oregon was not really moving the ball because they were trying to get too cute throwing the ball. They were dropping back and just running straight drop back stuff. And Stanford did a nice job of their linebackers getting depth and getting underneath things. And the run game got going a little bit. And then the second half, they ran a couple play actions that hit pretty big. But then they also had some double moves. But Oregon didn't take advantage of the play action the way they need to, which is why it was only a 14-6 game at halftime. Whereas other teams took advantage early and really ran them off the field with their play action stuff and created some early big plays. So when you look at this formation, for example, and this is a heavy run formation for UCLA, look how tight Stanford is. You've got the two linebackers are less than 5 yards from the ball. They've got their safety down, who's about 6 yards off the ball. That's it. They've got a field corner playing off, and then their boundary corner who's got some decent length down there is playing press, and then their safety's cheating to the middle of the field, but he's playing inside of the ball. And so you've got some tight end opportunities there. I mean, Notre Dame has tight ends that can flat out run by their safety right there. Flat out have tight end. Eli Rarian can run by that guy. Holden States can run by that guy. So there's certainly some concepts you can do. And then, of course, you've got guys that should be able to win on the backside. Notre Dame also will do a lot of comebacks because what Stanford will do out of this press look down at the bottom. Now, they made change against Notre Dame because Notre Dame has struggled against press in the past. But what they tend to do against press is they tend to do a press bail. So at the snap, the guy will kind of open up and run and keep his eyes inside as best he can. But teams have been able to hit some outcuts against that, a lot of comebacks against that. So those are certainly things. And if you can catch Stanford playing off coverage, some of those deep comebacks can be money against them into the boundary and to the field as well. Now, at times they'll drop this guy right here. Will drop into the coverage, we'll drop into coverage. They'll do a lot of that. But that's like 15, 20-yard comebacks against them because if they're playing off coverage, once you get them to flip their hips, they're just not quite athletic enough to plant and drive and get down underneath those routes. Oregon hit them with a lot of those type of concepts in their particular game. And I think Sam Hartman could have some success against those as well. But you guys see what I'm talking about. You see the look that I'm talking about when Stanford was in – or when UCLA was under center, you see it even tighter. And I believe this was a first or second down play. But now they're under center. They got their 5 guys up. The safety's even more downhill now. And now the free safety, as you can see here, is about 10 yards off the ball. Where before, when they were still in shotgun, that safety was, let's pull it up. That safety was, about 10, 13 yards off the ball. So again, just something as simple as 12 personnel under center versus 12 personnel in shotgun. You're going to get different action from UCLA or from Stanford. And that's where I think the play action stuff can really come into play. And we saw Notre Dame hit some of that stuff last week against Wake Forest. So we know it's there. We know they can hit it. But those are going to be things that I hope to see Notre Dame be able to accomplish in the pass game against a team that's just really not good defending the pass. Now, I still want to see some drop back stuff. I think there's some level stuff they can do. Stanford, in pure drop back, Stanford will bail their linebackers. I'm curious to see how they're going to handle Notre Dame's mesh stuff. From what I've seen of them in the past, they'll pass a lot of it off and then just drive on the mesh. So like there's like a safety coming down they'll play some two high looks, but they play a lot of single high looks. So like if Notre Dame's running their mesh concepts, they'll basically just keep the safety and the linebackers to a side and then just pass them off and then just drive on them, which is a good way to handle that if you're a team that plays a lot of zone, and Stanford plays a lot of zone. But against those mesh concepts, if Notre Dame's able to do some stuff behind it that's effective, I think the deep ends behind it, the post ends. So like if I'm Notre Dame and you're in a 2x2 with the tight ends or with 11 personnel, whatever the case may be, I could see something like so if I'm trying to think of how to let me just draw this up real quick. So if I'm Notre Dame, one of the looks that I would give this week is this right here. I'm gonna draw it up. This is something I think we could see from Notre Dame this week. This concept right here. So I'm gonna be a Jesse, right? But I don't have the cool whiteboard that Jesse has, right? So let's look at that. You guys see that formation right there? Okay, it's a little 11 personnel bounce kind of look. Some things I would like to see Notre Dame do is this concept right here. And so I'd motion the receiver down and I'd run my mesh stuff with my outside receiver in my slot. You guys see that? Okay, so that's something that they're going to do. And then what I would like to then see is something kind of here from the tight end. And you can either do a tight end, you can have your tight end run an in cut there like that. So now if the linebackers jump the mesh and the outside guy jumps the mesh, then you're going to see here. Let me do this. So let me do this. So you guys see that? We'll do it this way. So you guys see that, right? Now you can see a little bit better. So in that type of concept, you've got a bit of a drive concept here with the mesh concept, but now you can bring your tight end on an in cut. You could also do some different things where with your tight end, where the tight end can run the post, and then you can bend your outside receiver. You can run some out cuts and corner cuts. I mean, there's a lot of three-way go type stuff you can do out of that look. If Stanford's going to be as aggressive with their driving on the mesh stuff, then there's some things I think Notre Dame can do behind it to hit some big plays because their corners and their safeties their safeties are just not real rangy guys. They're not great coverage guys. Their nickels aren't great coverage guys. So that's like an example of some things that Notre Dame has done. Now, the problem with Notre Dame has done this year is when they run a lot of their mesh, they do something like this. Here, let me get something here. It'll be a little easier to see. Here. Okay. So what Notre Dame has done a lot this year with their mesh stuff is this. So just give you kind of an example of what we've seen from Notre Dame with their mesh stuff. So when they run their mesh concepts, you guys see this right here, right? So what Notre Dame will do is it's kind of what we just talked about. They run these short meshes right here, right? So that's a short mesh. But then with the tight end right here, they'll have this tight end kind of run let's kind of do this backwards. Okay, they'll have him kind of run like a middle route right there. And so what you end up having is like this just jumbled up mess of massive humanity in the middle of the field. And then so what happens is when you do this and you do it as much as Notre Dame has done it, your backer level here, right? Your backer level here can drive on this, and then your safeties back here can also come down and drive on that because there's no vertical threat. What I'm saying is to use your tight ends now to do more vertical oriented stuff to attack that, and then still have your mesh. And then what'll happen is if you burn them a couple times behind with your tight ends on some deep ends, or some other things you could do. Another concept that I like that I could see Notre Dame do out of this is again similar look is. So we kind of have a similar concept here of what we were talking about. And again, kind of bringing that motion down. These are just some different things that you can do out of this look. And then you can run your tight end your tight end on again, three-way go type of deal. You've got your mesh stuff, but instead of kind of, something like this, right? You could have some of those kind of concepts like that. You could run this guy back here on more of a deeper concept. So you're now getting more layers there. You could do something like that. And so instead of having him run this short mesh here, you've got more of a high-low type of concept. Those are areas of the middle of the field with a lot of different concepts where, just that's where Stanford's vulnerable. Yes, they can be attacked outside with some go shots, some comebacks, some out cuts, but I think there's a lot of success Notre Dame can have over the middle of the field, sort of attacking with different types of layers concepts. And we saw some of it last week. Would like to see more of it again this week. And then, of course, Sam Hartman's got to be willing to pull the trigger, because those are concepts that if you're not comfortable making your reads, you're going to throw blind and not see a safety sitting on the backside, or you're just not going to, you're going to be late throwing the ball and not want to throw the ball. So there's a lot of different things like that those are basic. I mean, those aren't rocket science, guys. Those are things you're going to see a lot of teams running from week to week that I think could be really effective concepts for Notre Dame in the pass game, where I think they can have some success, because that's just an area they need to thrive. And I'll dive more into that kind of stuff here in part 2 of the show. But so that's going to do it kind of for the offensive breakdown. I'm going to talk defense next, because that's an even bigger mismatch. I mean, and you got where do I got ink on myself? On my face? I got it on my face or on my hand? All right. If I got it on my hand, I got it on my face. Okay. You kind of scared me a little bit there, man. Okay. We're good. We're good. All right. So if you are looking at Notre Dame, and offensively, it's a bit of a mismatch. Defensively, it's even more so, and I'll dive into that here in a minute. Guys, man, you got to remember, man, I'm a football coach. You know how many times I've gotten marker and on my hand all the time. This is something you get kind of used to. Let's talk about the matchup of the Notre Dame defense against the Stanford offense. This is arguably the biggest mismatch of the season. I would contend that Stanford's offense is very similar to Wake Forest's. They are both good at receiver. They both have quality running backs. They both struggle at quarterback, and they both struggle protecting the quarterback. And, it's they're not good. And their numbers, again, are a little inflated by some performances against a couple teams, as I talked about before. I mean, obviously, you're talking about a team that right now ranks in scoring this year 113th in scoring and 110th in yards per play. And I was joking with a friend of mine that I actually had some people reach out to me and say that the Stanford offense scares them. I'm like, okay, why does it scare you? Well, can really move the ball. And I'm like, you only watched the Colorado game, didn't you? That's the only, or the Washington game. Those are the only games you've watched them play all year, aren't they? Oh yeah, those. Okay, you're going with the anomalies. They're not a very good offensive football team. They only scored 10 points on USC. They only scored 23 against Sacramento State, 20 against Arizona, 6 against Oregon, 7 against UCLA, 10 in a win over Washington State, 17 against Oregon State, 15 against Cal. They scored 37 against Hawaii, 33 against Washington, and 46 against Colorado. They have only scored more than 23 points in a game 3 times all year. In 8 of their 11 games, they were held to 23 points or more or less. And in 6 of their 11 games, they were held to 17 points or less. And they've been held to 10 points or less 4 times this season. They're not a very good offense. They've had some games that have, like I said, inflated their numbers. Against Colorado, they went for 523. Against Washington, they went for 495. And against Hawaii, they went for 406. But they have 222 against Oregon, 349 against USC. They only went for 387 against Sacramento State, 354 against Arizona, 292 against UCLA, 217 against Washington State in a win, 324 against Oregon State, and 289 against Cal. So, and that's a Cal defense, by the way, that's giving up 35 points a game. Cal is not a very good defense this season. Cal's given up 59 points in the game, 52, 34, 50, 63, 39, and they gave up 15 to Stanford. So their offense is not very good. There are a couple players that are nice players, but overall, this is a mismatch. This is a mismatch that Notre Dame should be able to dominate. Now, here's a question. Can Notre Dame improve in some of the areas defensively that they need to get better at? Third down being an example. Stanford's not a very good third down defense. Notre Dame has had, in my opinion, 3 pretty good third down games in a row. I think Notre Dame was good on third down against Clemson. Not great, but good. Held them to 5 of 15. They were very good on third down against Pitt, dominated Pitt on third down, 1 of 11. And then they were decent against Wake Forest. They gave up 5 of 13, 38.5%. Not a great performance, but some couple of those were on I think 3 of them, 2 or 3 of them were on like one drive. So they've been better in recent games on third down. Now they've got to really, to me, finish strong on third down and shut down Stanford, because the thing you can't allow to happen, and when you look at what this game was like last year, you cannot allow Stanford to convert third downs. Stanford was also not a very good third down offense last year. This season, Stanford ranks 91st in third down offense. Last season, they were 37.8% last season. This year, they're at 36.5. They were not very good on third down either last year. The problem is one of their better games was against Notre Dame. They converted 7 third downs. That tied for the most third downs they converted the entire season. Game against Notre Dame last year. You cannot allow that to happen. Cannot allow that to happen. You have to be better shutting down their third down offense. If Notre Dame does that, this game will not even be remotely competitive. But they haven't always consistently done that. But in every other area, guys, I mean, you talk about, are you a championship defense or not? In all these defensive categories, Notre Dame ranks in the top 10 in points per game, yards allowed per game, yards per play, red zone defense, red zone touchdown defense, fewest big plays allowed, turnovers forced. They rank top 10 in fewest passing yards allowed, passing yards per attempt, fewest touchdowns, most interceptions, lowest completion percentage, pass efficiency defense, fewest big plays allowed. I mean, they're a top 10 defense in a lot of categories. And it just speaks to the phenomenal job that Al Golden has done. Now, what Notre Dame has a chance to do that in this game is really finish off on a high note. And if they can hold Stanford in check the way that they should, then they've got a chance to have one of their most productive defenses since 2012. I mean, if you look at some of the past teams Notre Dame had in 21, they gave up 19.7 points per game, 19.7 in 2020, 17.9 in 2019, 18.2 in 2017. So, and then, of course, you look pre-Brian Van Gorder, they held teams to 12.8 back in 2012. So they've held teams to the teens for several years. I think last year was since Elko kind of started to turn things around. So Notre Dame gave up 27.8 points per game the year before Elko arrived. They dropped that down to 21.5. And if you actually take away defensive touchdowns and things like that, it was closer to 20, sub 20. But since then, 18, 19, 20, and 21, they held opponents under 20 points per game every year. Last year, they gave up 23. If you take away offensive scores and things like that, they were like 21 and a half. So it wasn't great, but they played some pretty good offenses last season as well. But this year, they're much, much better. And if you can shut Stanford down the way you should, all of a sudden your numbers look really good, and you're really going to have some elite numbers. And whether that's good to help Al Golden, build his resume or not. I mean, that's fine, but it's just about sheer dominance. And if you can hold them to a touchdown, then you're going to be dropping down near 15 points a game. And they've done that against these type of teams. Again, what has Notre Dame done against teams that are not very good, and especially not very good on offense? Held Navy to 3 points, held Tennessee State 3 points, give up 17 to Central Michigan. They held Pitt to 7 points, and they held Wake Forest to 7 points. So they've proven that they can do this. I mean, and Notre Dame's only given up over 20 points in a game 4 times this year. And it just they're pretty good. They're a pretty good defense. And Stanford, as I said, is not a very good offense. So this is one where you should be able to dominate. You should be able to dominate. Let's talk about the pass game matchup. Again, this is a bit of a mismatch. Stanford's got a decent pass game. Their quarterback, Ashton Daniels, is an okay player. I'm not super high on him. He's got a pretty live arm, but he's young and inexperienced, and just a guy that's a work in progress. There's some things to like about him, But overall, he's not a super talented. I mean, he's not a super productive player. 58.7% completion percentage on the year. He's averaging 190 passing yards per game, 11 touchdowns, 7 picks, and he's averaging 7.0 yards per attempt. Now, he's had some moments. Against Colorado, he threw for 396 yards. For Washington, threw for 367. And that's why I have people tell me, well, this kid's really good. But he threw 19 yards against USC and got knocked out. He threw for 69 yards against Sacramento State. He threw for 198 against Arizona, 115 against Washington State, 200 against Oregon State, and then 188 against Cal on 35 attempts. And Notre Dame has the best pass defense in college football, in my opinion. When you look at context, I know they rank third in fewest yards per game. They're second in pass efficiency. But if you look at the teams that are in that conversation with them, I would argue that Notre Dame has been better tested. The only team to me that can compete with them for that moniker is Ohio State. Ohio State has a pretty good pass defense as well. But I don't think Ohio State's played the passing offenses that Notre Dame has played this season. And, Notre Dame's pass offense is probably the best pass offense they've really played this year. Western Kentucky has not been a real good team this season. Their pass offense is good. They put up numbers, but it hasn't been nearly as productive as it's been in past years. Austin Reed's down like 70 yards per game this season. He was at 352 in 2021. Bailey Zappi was at 433 in 2021, but this year they're at 283.8 passing the football. So numbers-wise, they're good, but the rest of their schedule, there's not a lot of teams that throw the football effectively on their schedule. Where Notre Dame, I think, has been better tested, and the numbers are very close between those two teams. So just for me, I think that Notre Dame has the best pass defense in college football. If you're an Ohio State fan and you want to argue that they do, that's fair. I'm not going to argue with you too much. That's just my opinion when you look at relative to who they've played. But Stanford's pass offense is just okay. Now, they do have a couple talented receivers. That's where I think that they perform well. They have some guys that have some ability. Obviously, Alec Manor is a guy that's had some really big moments this year. He's creeping up on 1,000 yards on the season. He has 55 catches for 955 yards. A lot of that came against Colorado. He had 294 yards against Colorado, but he's kind of had some other good games too. He went 8 for 90 against UCLA, 9 for 146 against Washington, and he went for 3 for 122 against Oregon State, who has a very good pass defense, by the way. So he's a legitimate weapon, legitimate guy you have to contend with. He's got some really good size to him, 6'2", 6'3", over 200 pounds. He's a pretty thick kid. If anyone that watched Colorado game, he's got some really good ball skills. And like what he can do as far as outplaying people for the ball. Notre Dame hasn't played a receiver like that in a while. Now, they've held up pretty well against those guys, right? They held up very well against Marvin Harrison in that regard. But it's been a while since Notre Dame has played a 6'2", 6'3" kid that's got some size to him, some length to him, and ability to compete for the football. So that's something that I think you're going to see Stanford do early, is try to take some shots down the field to him, try to get their tight end Roush involved against the Notre Dame safeties. I think you'll see some play actions of bootlegs early to try to get the quarterback out of the pocket and get going, to try to get some sort of rhythm throwing the football against Notre Dame. I think that's definitely going to be something we're going to see Stanford try to do against Notre Dame. And look, last year, Stanford had success moving the chains with the football, passing the football against Notre Dame. Tanner McKee last season completed 66.7% of his passes against Notre Dame last year, 288 yards, lower yards per attempt, 7.4. But they did a nice job of moving the chains, getting him out of the pocket, using the screen game effectively. Notre Dame had multiple screens that they gave up last season, not tackling well in space, not being disciplined down the field. So again, it goes back to looking at situations where, man, you should dominate, but you got to be locked in. You've got to be focused on what they're doing. And then the last matchup that I'll talk about is just the run game. Stanford's run game is not very good. Notre Dame's run defense has just been kind of okay this season. They played a run defense against Wake last week, or rush offense against Wake last week, that wasn't much better than this. It was better, about 20 yards better, but not a whole lot better. And the big reason why is their offensive line's not as good as Wake's, which is saying something because Wake's offensive line's not very good. So when you look at this particular matchup, it's one that it's about finishing strong, right? That's a big thing for me. It's about finishing strong, and I expect them to shut down the pass game. They need to shut down the pass game, but this is an area where if the defense can make me feel a little bit better about just how good they are, this is an area I'd like to see them finish well in. And that is completely shut down the Stanford run game. They have some decent backs. They really do. They have some talented backs, but their offensive line's a mess. They start two true freshmen. They've got three guys under 300 pounds in their starting lineup, including both tackles. If I remember correctly, let me just check here real quick to see my notes here. I believe both starting tackles, yes, they're 6'6" and 6'7". And they're both under 300 pounds. If Mikula starts in this game, like basically the starting lineup they had in the last game, the one left guard was 290, the center's 301, and the other center, who's a true freshman, is 315. So they're not a very big offensive line. They're not very physical. They're not real strong. This is a situation where Notre Dame should absolutely dominate at the point of attack. And if you want to say, hey, what does finishing strong look like on defense? We're going to have a segment about that on offense here in a minute. It's that right there. Shut down the run game, continue to be a dominant pass offense. Just keep doing what you're doing there, but then dominate here. And I think that's the reason why I don't think this game is going to be overly close. Ryan sent me his prediction for the game today. I won't tell you what it is, but it's not going to be overly close. This game should be a blowout. I'm just being honest. It should be. But the defense is going to have to make sure that they don't allow Stanford to do what they did last year against Notre Dame, which is control the clock and shorten the game, limit possessions, and really just make it a game where, it just I still just kind of sits in my craw. And I know it does for some of you guys too from last season, but it's just one of those things where everything that you said before the game Notre Dame can't do, they did. They allowed to happen. And Stanford had the ball last season for 36 minutes. They didn't run the ball for a lot of yards. They only ran for 97 yards, but they ran it a bunch. They were able to move the chains, and Notre Dame just can't let that happen this year. Just can't. They have to be better at getting the early stops and really locking them down. I think that's going to be a very important part of this game. It's something that we should see, but we need to see it. And then one thing I am a little concerned about in this game is Notre Dame had some contain issues last week against Wake Forest at times, and Ashton Daniels is a quality athlete that can run a little bit. He's not like a scare me too much kind of guy, but I mean, he's their leading rusher at 288 yards. He's again, he's not a guy that should like take over the game and things along those lines, but he can tuck it and run and hurt you. And if you don't have contain, and they've got to make sure he doesn't do that. That was the biggest thing in the Washington game that I thought was a huge part of them sticking with Washington. Is Washington did a terrible job containing him with his legs, scrambles and designed runs. And that was by far his best game of the year. He passed for 367 yards. He ran for 81 yards. He rushed for 2 touchdowns, passed for a touchdown. He showed his potential in that game. Notre Dame can't allow him to get comfortable and get going in that game. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the Keys to Victory show on Friday. But that's an area where I want to see Notre Dame perform well. Really finish the season off on a strong note by shutting down the Stanford run game. That's going to do it for the matchups that matter. Next, I'm going to dive into things that I want to see from the Notre Dame offense that are going to make me feel really good going into the offseason. And step one was Wake. Jared Parker passed that test with flying colors. Now step 2 is the Stanford game. Step 3 will be the bowl game. So I'm going to talk about what I need to see this weekend from Notre Dame against Stanford that's going to make me feel better. I'm going to play the theme song here for a minute as I get my notes prepped for that part of the show and transition from this breakdown to that breakdown. So I'm going to play that for about a minute or two, kind of get some just get ready for that second part. So don't go. I'm going to be right back here in about a minute or two, and I'm going to break down just some things I want to see from the Notre Dame offense in this game against Stanford that are going to make me feel very good. While I'm doing that, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. And I promise you, and the time it's going to take for me to put my notes together and get back, you can go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and go to sign up and log in, sign up in the top right and sign up for membership and still be back before I'm back. It can happen that quickly. So definitely do that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, let's dive into part two of today's show. In today's show, I'm going to talk about what I want to see from the Notre Dame offense that's going to make me feel like this team is turning a corner under Jared Parker. I personally expect Jared Parker back next year. That's just my feeling. I think he's done enough this season to say, hey, let's give him a second year. Let's see what he can do in year two. There's some things going on recruiting wise that's really good. And I know that some people aren't going to want to hear that. But if that's going to be the case, that you need to have some positive vibes going into the offseason, because if you don't play well down the stretch, then even if he comes back, it's going to be a lot of negativity surrounding the program, and you can't have that. You need to do some things, and some people are just, I mean, we had people say, "I'll never support Al Golden, no matter what he does." Okay, whatever. You're always going to have that. I think most Notre Dame fans are very objective. That they'll have their opinion. They feel strong about it based on what they've seen, but they're willing to have their opinion changed if the facts on the ground change with them. And that's what Jared Parker needs to do down the stretch. There's nothing he can do in the final two games, in final three, if you include Wake, that's going to erase Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, and Clemson. Nothing. But you can still feel like, hey, we showed enough progress, or we saw enough progress from Notre Dame that makes me say, if you can build on this and then carry this into some other games, you're going to have a chance to be pretty good. I mean, there's a post on our board from one of our better posters, one of our longtime OGs, actually. And he talked about, like, if we'd have seen what Notre Dame did against Wake and Pitt and a couple games like that, and NC State, and if they'd have done that, like, that same kind of game plan, aggressiveness, attack mode in every game, they're at worst 10-1 right now. And I agree with them. And that's kind of been my big frustration. And so, but there's just a lot of things we saw in the Wake Forest game, not just the results, because again, the points and the yards don't matter as much to me, because you have better players than they do, significantly better players. And I would argue there's a lot more NFL talent on the Wake Forest defense. And I'm curious to get Ryan Roberts' opinion on this. I'll ask him this after the show. And maybe it'll be something that I'll probably ask him this on Friday when we do our live show with the Keys to Victory and our prediction show, if he feels the same way. But I feel like there's more NFL talent at Wake Forest than Stanford on defense. And so you should put up a lot of numbers. You should blow Stanford out. It's not about that. It's the how, the why. And to me, that's the important thing. And if Jared Parker can make some of the necessary changes down the stretch, then you say, hey, look, He's got to prove it to me against Texas A&M. He's got to prove it to me against Florida State. He's got to prove it to me against Louisville. He's got to prove it to me against the best teams on the football schedule next year. He's going to have to prove it to me in the postseason. One thing for me, I was talking to a friend yesterday, and the thing I said to him was like, I really want to play a really good defensive football team in a bowl game. I really do. The reason I say that is if Notre Dame gets like one of the things we've seen in the, as far as the bowl projections is LSU. I'm like, well, I think Notre Dame can beat LSU, and I think LSU can beat Notre Dame. I think it's two good football teams, but I would predict Notre Dame to win that game. And part of it is because Notre Dame has played well against teams like that. They're a lot like USC. Really good offense, really dynamic quarterback, terrible defense, and we saw what Notre Dame did to them. And we, Ole Miss has got a decent defense, but Ole Miss is not a great defense either. I mean, they're okay. They gave up 49 to LSU, 35 to A&M, 52 to Georgia. Like, if Notre Dame goes into a bowl game where you've got a month to prepare and you light up LSU's defense or you light up an Ole Miss defense, what does that really tell us about the Notre Dame offense? I mean, it's good. I'm not going to act like it's not a good thing and it won't have some people excited. But does it really tell us if this defense has turned the corner? I don't think that it really does. And the same thing is true if it's like a Tennessee type of team. Tennessee's got a better defense than those other two teams, but in their last two games, they gave up 36 to Missouri, they gave up 38 to Georgia, gave up 27 to Kentucky, 29 to Florida. I really want to see them play a team that's really good on defense. And the reason I say that is because that could kind of give us a little bit of a glimpse into like, okay, yeah, these changes matter, but we don't know who that's going to be right now. So the focus is on what can you do against Stanford? And there's several things that really are at the forefront for me of what I'm going to be looking for. Number one is continuation of the youth movement we saw on Saturday. One of my frustrations has been, and there's two ways we can look at what happened on Saturday and what we can view if they do it again on upcoming Saturday against Stanford. Number one is, why did it take you this long to lean into these younger players? No one's going to be able to tell me that just like that, the light went on for all those kids during the bye week. You can't convince me of that. I coached football. I've been doing this a long time. You don't have this mass position-wide light goes on moment in one game. No, you did a great job building up their confidence and how you prepared for the game, but you should have done that sooner. That's my issue. But that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, you know what? Screw it. I'm happy they did it, and I'm happy it worked out the way that it did. And that's kind of where I'm at, is a continuation of the youth movement. I want to see Audric go out there and do his thing. That's totally fine. But I still want to see Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. That's an area where I did not like the game plan as much. I understand what Notre Dame's trying to do, and they're trying to get Audric, all these yards and get him over 100 yards and over 1,100 on the season and all that. And, try to get him probably over 1,200 in this game, and not in the game, but just kind of overall. And that's fine, but I need to see Jeremiah Love. I need to see Jadarian Price. I want to continue to lean into Tobias and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison and Rico Flores as the integral parts of the pass game. Yes, I want to still see Chris Tyree. I want to see you lean into more of having Eli Raritan be a part of the pass game. I would love to see Cooper Flanagan, get a ball or two in this game as well. Holden Stace. I mean, we act like we kind of talk about Holden Stace like he's a veteran because he's played so much this year. He's a true sophomore. He's part of this as well. It'd be nice to see him finish the year on a high note with some big plays. So to me, the reason this is number one, and this is what somebody asked in the mailbag yesterday, and what another guy talked about on our board, is like, man, like when you look at this team, yes, we're frustrated about this, and this, but good Lord, there's going to be so much talent coming back next year. And now a lot of these kids are getting the experience and they're taking their lumps, but those are things that are going to help them next year, that if the quarterback position can get figured out, whether it's a portal guy or whether it's developing the kids on the roster, got a lot of weapons to throw to next year. And we haven't even talked about like Braylon James and KK Smith, who's been injured all year. Those are two guys that are going to be part of the conversation. Jaden Thomas is going to get back to being healthy. Hopefully Deion Colsey comes back next year. I don't know that he will, but I hope he does and can stay healthy. And then, of course, you're going to add Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert and Logan Saldate and Keedron Young and Jack Larson and Aeneas Williams and all those kind of guys. I saw that On3 dropped Aeneas Williams to a 3-star. That is just beyond stupid. Just beyond. They had him as a top 300 player in like all their rankings, and all of a sudden he's a 3-star after a dominant senior year. It's just a clown show over there. But that's different conversation for a different day. So for me, when I look at the youth movement, to me, more than anything, schematically, I think that's something that can get me, and I think can get a lot of you excited, is just continuing to build around those young players, continue to see what those young guys can do. Brandon Plesner just asked a question: Do they continue playing Braylon James, or does he redshirt? I'd play him. Braylon James is not a 5-year player. If Braylon James is a guy that's in position to come back for a 5th year because he's not going to the NFL, then he hasn't panned out, and you're moving on, right? That I'd play him, because to me, Braylon's a kid that could go from not playing a whole lot in year 1 to being a dude. We've seen this a lot. We've seen this a ton. Kevin Austin didn't play a whole lot his first 3 years. Comes out as a senior, he's our leading receiver. Miles Boykin barely played his first 3 years. Played a little bit as a junior, more of a rotation guy. Comes out in the bowl game, has a big game in the bowl game against LSU as a junior, and then he went out and that kind of sprungboard him into a lot of production the next year, right? I mean, so in 2018, Miles Boykin was Notre Dame's leading receiver. But if you go look at what Miles Boykin did in previous seasons, he didn't do much. He had 12 catches for 253 yards as a junior in 2017. Well, guess what? A big chunk of that came in the bowl game where he had 3 catches for 102 yards. Everything else he had done that season was basically mop-up duty. He had a 54-yard touchdown grab against Miami of Ohio off the bench. It was with the backups in the game. But that late season surge from Miles helped him kind of break out as a junior, and he became the guy the next year. We've seen that before. We've seen guys, Chase Claypool as a true freshman only caught 5 balls, played a lot more than Braylon James did, but he only caught 5 balls, comes out the next year, and he's an integral part of the offense. 29 catches, I believe he had, 400 some yards starting in the slot. We've seen guys go from Jaden Thomas last year as a sophomore. I mean, as a freshman 2 years ago in 2021, didn't do a whole lot, kind of grew late in the year, and then comes out the next season and boom, he's one of their better receivers by the middle of the season. So we've seen it. And to me, I would say play Braylon. He's shown the last 2 games he's played that he can win at the line of scrimmage. I mean, he smoked the pick guy on a slant route, one of the best executed slant routes of the season, smoked the guy from Wake Forest on the go route, would have been a touchdown if Angeli didn't look to the right side. Angeli made the correct read. I talked about this the other day, but let's just say he would have looked the other way. Then boom, you're taking a shot, and Braylon's got his guy beat. If it's a good ball, it's a touchdown. So I'd play him. I'd continue to move Jaden Greathouse around. Continue to get Tobias Merriweather a part of what you're doing down the field. I mean, we saw him catch a touchdown against Stanford last year for a big play. So there's a lot of things Notre Dame can do to continue the youth movement. And if those kids all come out and we have another similar game to what we saw last week, I think that more than anything is because at the end of the day, the personnel, that more than anything is going to get us fired up about what Notre Dame can be down, going into next season on offense. Another thing that I want to see is just a continuation of just the aggressiveness that we saw against Wake Forest. And they didn't throw the ball down the field a ton, and it's never about throwing it down the field a ton. It's never about throwing 10 balls that go beyond 20 yards past the line of scrimmage. It's never about that for me. It's always about just an overall aggressiveness. And aggressiveness can mean throwing RPOs, being willing to throw RPOs. Aggressiveness can be, willing to create isolation type of throws. I mean, Notre Dame went 3 of 6 against Wake Forest last week with Sam Hartman throwing the ball down the field. That's great. I mean, I'm glad to see that. Actually, hold on a second. That cannot. Yeah, he went 3 of 4 throwing the ball down the field last week. That's great. Love to see it. But again, you can only throw 5-6 balls down the field and still have an aggressive game plan. When you look at it overall, Sam completed 8 balls that went 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's more than we've normally seen in past weeks, if we're being completely honest. I mean, against Clemson, he completed 1 pass that was beyond 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. So it's just not something we've seen a lot of. Even against Pitt, he only completed 5 balls that were 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. Again, I could kind of keep doing this kind of all day. That's just not been what Notre Dame has done a lot in recent games with him. They just have not been a team that was really willing to attack down the field. Only completed 2 balls down the field against USC that were 20 yards down the past line of scrimmage. They only completed 1 out of 8 against Louisville. So they had some success hitting those downfield shots, but it's more so about just an overall aggressiveness, an overall willingness to throw RPOs early, to take one-on-one isolation throws to a guy like Eli Raridan or Tobias Merriweather, be willing to draw up concepts that hey, we'll take a shot here if we can, but if the shot's not there, we've got something coming open. It could be a big catch and run situation. There's just an overall aggressiveness to me that had me very excited about what this offense could be. And I don't need Notre Dame to throw it 50 times against Stanford. I'm good with a balanced attack. I think you can be balanced against Stanford. But if you're going to run the ball a lot early and you're going to get Audric Estime's yards, then I better see you having things built around that. I better see play action shots down the field. Guys, I talked about this earlier. This is a terrible play action defense. If your play design is to come out and run the football, that's fine, because I've seen teams not throw the ball a lot, but still be aggressive. I mean, I've had people tell me like, oh yeah, JJ McCarthy had a huge game against Ohio State last year. I'm like, did he really? Yeah, I think he threw for like 300 yards. I'm like, no, he didn't. He didn't throw for 300 yards against Ohio State last year. But you think about it, because what do you remember? You remember the big plays. You remember him hitting Cornelius Johnson over the top. You see, he had 263 yards passing. He only threw 24 passes. He only completed 12, but they were down the field. It was tight end over the top. It was Cornelius Johnson down the field. He was willing to attack down the field and played off of the run game to set up those big play opportunities. I don't want to see Sam Hartman only complete 12 passes, really, unless it's like for 300 some yards. The point is, you can be aggressive even when you're running the football. You can be an attacking pass offense even if you're running the football. And that's what I want to see. I want to see more movement stuff. I want to see more bootlegs. I think Stanford's very susceptible to that kind of stuff, whether it be a pure boot where he gets out or sort of like a half roll type of bootleg where, you get out and you set up and then you throw some sort of throwback or some sort of deep shot. Stanford bails kind of hard at times because they don't want to get run by, but you can still run by them if you're willing to do so. But to me, take advantage of that. Do some clear out stuff. Like there's things I would do where I would go a 3-by-1 and I'd clear them out with 3 verts from my 1 and just bring a guy on a stutter over and just have like a back check down, try to occupy that backer and bring that over behind that. And that guy's going to catch the ball maybe 15, 18 yards down the field. But if he outruns the corner, he's in a catch and run situation. That's aggressive. That's not a bomb, but that's aggressive to me because you're designing something that's going to isolate a guy in hopes of moving the chains, number one. But if you execute it right and you throw it right and all those type of things, it can be more than just a 15 to 18 yard move the chains type of play. Those are things that I want to see out of the Notre Dame offense in this game. I don't care about trick plays to take advantage of a bad defense. I mean, those are fun, but that's not what I'm looking for. Another thing I want to see in this game, and this is going to be really interesting, I want to see the offensive line finish on a strong note. Stanford is not a very good front seven talent-wise, but they fight, they compete, and they battle. Wake wasn't a great front seven either, and they did okay against them, did well against them, but not great. Stanford's a little bit more physical than Wake. Wake was more athletic. So this is an opportunity for Billy Schrauth who will start, or Ashton Craig if he plays, if Zeke Correll's not able to go, to where you're going to be in a situation where you can do some things in the run game to where you can tell me that, hey, this offensive line's figuring it out. The numbers weren't sexy last week, but when I watched the film, it's like this was a positive step. This was a step forward. This wasn't like a giant Harry Hiestand type leap forward, but this was a good step forward. What I want to see in this game is another big step forward, whether it's 175 yards rushing or 275 yards rushing. It's not so much about the numbers, but how you play. I want to see the interior guys being more physical. I want to see Blake Fisher be consistently more effective in this game. That's going to be an important thing for me. And even if Zeke Correll starts, I would like to see Ashton Craig at some point in time. If you have a blowout in here, I'd like to see Jagasaw get in the game if he travels. I don't know if he's going to travel. I'd like to see Emil Wagner get an opportunity. I'd like to see some of those younger guys. Coach Freeman talked about Joe Otting, kind of getting bumped up. Maybe Sullivan Absher, Sam Pendleton, whoever those young guys are. Be nice to see them get some playing time, but I'm more so concerned about the starting offensive line coming out and finishing on a strong note. It means Billy Schrouth. It means Pat Coogan. It means Ashton Craig, if he's in the game, finishing strong. And even for guys who aren't coming back, I mean, if Joe Walt doesn't come back, if Zeke Correll doesn't come back, if Blake Fisher doesn't come back, this isn't so much about the personnel with them. It's more about Joe Rudolph. And can Joe Rudolph get this unit to kind of start playing with a different mentality? Because again, the success, if they can have success against Stanford, and it still be just more of the same because Stanford's just not good. But it's more so about, I want to see them coming off low, shoulders down, exploding with their hips, driving their feet through contact, being violent with their hands, combo blocks, playing with better timing and getting that movement, getting up to the next level. I want to see things like that. And I know that Stanford stinks, but you can still look at that and say that translates to this team, to this opponent, to this type of schedule. And that's what I want to see. So that's absolutely, I think, a big part of this. And if Billy Schrouth can play good for a second game in a row, that would be a really good sign heading into the offseason for me. And then here's the third part of this breakdown for me. Look, there's concepts that I talked about last week that I want to run and see more of. I want to see more of the running backs getting involved in the pass game. I think Brandon Plesner talked about that, I believe, in the chat. I agree with Brandon on that. I'd like to see I'd like to see some of the backs used a little bit more effectively. I'd love to see like a Jeremiah Love, like with how Stanford bails with their linebackers, with Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price in the game. I'd love to see like a delay arrow where you just clear them out with some sort of verticals, even a 3x1, like kind of take them over, the backside, because then you kind of mess up there. Like when you run verts out of a 3x1 where you're trying to open somebody up, where I talked about the drag or with a back, the thing I like about a 3x1 is what it tends to be is like it forces them to kind of move their eyes because you're moving this way instead of just pure this way, right? So just some little thing like that. But even if it's out of a 2x2, just something where you let those linebackers go and then just hit Jeremiah or Jadarian, like just a little quick angle. Let the line come up. It's almost like a screen, but it's not a screen. It's a clear out. Clear them out because their linebackers drop so hard. Pure drop back. I mean, you're letting everybody know this is not a run. This is a pass. I'd exaggerate even as much as I can, sort of the tackle alignments, where they're like clearly like in a drop back type of alignment. Get Stanford to bail and then run a boom, boom, hit that sucker at 5 yards and go. Those are all things that I'd love to see from this team in this game, the way Stanford plays. But it's also about improving, showing me that you can improve in areas where you haven't been great this year. And so that means third down. Come out against Stanford and be good on third down. Now, look, I get it. These are not good third down defenses that we're talking about. But, guys, Notre Dame has not been good on third down against teams who aren't good on third down in the past as well. That's just the fact. So come out and be good on third down, but not just move the chains against a bad team. Show me continued purpose on third down because I've always said this. It's process over results. You want a perfect example of what I mean. Notre Dame could go out on Saturday and go 7 of 10 on third down against Stanford, and I'm saying, okay, I still don't know that they're going to be a good third down defense next year. Well, how can you say that? They were really good on third down. That's just because they were better than Stanford. They just ran plays and Stanford couldn't stop them. There was no purpose. There was no intentionality. There was no building on things. They could just go out and just run plays just to run plays, just kind of calling stuff just to call stuff with no building on top of each other and have 500 yards of offense and 50 points. It doesn't mean that you've moved the needle. It just means your guys are way better than their guys. That's it. But what I want to see is the third down success be better because there was intentionality to it. There was design to it. There was purpose to it. This is what they do on third down. We're going to go at it. We're going to take advantage of it. That's what I want to see, more so than just the results. Now, the results need to come with that because if you're intentional with things but you don't execute it, it tells me your preparation during the week, yes, your game plan was good, but your installation and teaching of that game plan was subpar. That doesn't answer it either. So there does need to be some results too those things, but it's got to come from a place of there's intentionality to it. That's something that I want to see. And then, improving in run game. I want to see them improve in the run game. Again, not so much, run for 275 yards. They do. That's nice. But it's more so, I think the design is good. I think they're mixing up their runs better. They're having a better understanding of how to protect the edge with different things, continue to incorporate RPOs into it, play action pass game. I want to see a really well-designed play action pass game because it's going to tell me they value that part of the game more. They did a great job against Wake Forest. Great play action pass game against Wake. As I mentioned before, there was I think they went 4 of 6 on play action for over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 long touchdowns, a 19-yard touchdown pass to Eli Raridan, 48-yard touchdown pass to Jane Greathouse. All good things off play action. I want to see more of that this week against Stanford, and it's an area they haven't been good at. And then last one is the screen game. The screen game has not been good for a while. They had some success with it early against bad teams, but the screen game has not been good for a while. Screen game to me is 3 things. It's the quick perimeter screens, right? Now screens, bubble screens, tunnel screens. It's the running back screens, whether it be a swing screen, a slip screen, but then also some of the more vertically oriented screens where you maybe bring a receiver on a crossing route where you invite the pass rush up and you dump it over top. It almost looks like a crossing route, but he catches it at or behind the line. Things where the running backs are doing the angle routes that I talked about earlier. Some teams will run that, where they'll run that angle. Notre Dame did it last year. Well, they'll actually send the receivers vertically and block people and then invite the D-line upfield because then the back hits his ankle and you hit it to him. He's still behind the line of scrimmage. So I'd just like to see a little bit more of the screen game. And the reason I brought this up this week and not last week is I don't know that Wake was the team I would want to screen a lot because their safeties were experienced and really good at seeing that stuff and flying downhill. They had a nickel that was really good at recognizing that stuff. Their linebacker, Roberts, was a real active kid that read that stuff well. I don't know that screen is something that if I was sort of the advisor to Jared Parker, hey, Drisk, what do you think we should run this week? I'd be like, we talk about a lot of things. I wouldn't really have a ton of screen stuff into my game plan. Against this team, I do think you can do that. I do think this is a team that you can screen effectively. And I'd like to see Notre Dame have a really good screen game plan. So, and then limit penalties. And then the final piece is show me that you are a team that can be focused on the road. I mean, crowd noise is not going to be an issue this week at all. And if it is, you've got major problems as a football program. I mean, Stanford it's their home crowd is really kind of sad and pathetic. Against Washington, number 4 team in the country, they had 24,000 people in the stands. Against UCLA, 30,000 people in the stands. Against Oregon, 32,000 people. Arizona, 38,000. Sacramento State, 23,000. They had 52,000 people in the stands last week because they were playing Cal, who's their cross-around rival. So you had a ton of Cal fans at the stadium. And if they're over 40,000 or 50,000 in this game, a big chunk of that's going to be Notre Dame fans. And so crowd noise won't be an issue for you in this game. You've got to be willing to go out there and say, hey, we're going to be efficient. We're going to limit penalties. We're going to get our communications going to be down. Just be sharp. That's what it comes down to, be sharp. So youth movement, continue the youth movement, be aggressive, show me that you can design things and build on things. Don't just, hey, this play looks good, let's run it, but have some intentionality to it. The way that Notre Dame hit their play actions on Saturday were built off of their own tendencies. And then like the touchdown pass to Jane Greathouse, that was, I know that when we show run action, that safety's going to fly downhill and we can hit the post over behind it. That showed me intentionality, showed me purpose, and it went for a big play. I want to see more of that stuff in this game. If I see a lot of these things, O-line finishing strong, improving on third down, having a good play action game plan, using some screens effectively, all those things, if I see all those things and Notre Dame goes out there and puts up a lot of points and yards, I'm going to feel really good about where they are going to the bowl season. If they don't do those things but still have 50 points, 500 yards, I'll enjoy the win, and 9-3 is nice, but I won't feel as good about it. So those are the things I'm going to look for. I'm going to take another little intermission here. I'm going to come back in the next segment. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting. We're going to end this with a little bit of recruiting. Before I do that, I did want to get to one super chat here from Brandon Plesner. He asked a super chat here, said, what record does the staff focus on? Audric in the single season rushing record or Sam Hartman Moving up to third all-time passing TDs, what would you like to see? Number one, I don't care about either record, to be completely honest with you. I don't think that that it's a realistic thing for Audric Estime to be pursuing the all-time rushing record. I think it's over 1,400 yards, if I remember correctly. I'm going to look that up here real quick and see. I believe that the all-time record is over 1,400 yards. Just give me a second. I'm going to find that here real quick. Rushing numbers. Yes, it's 1,437 by Vegas Ferguson. So Audric Estime to me is what, over 300 yards away, like 334 yards away. You'd have to go for 168 yards the next two games to pass it. I don't see that. I don't really care. I don't know that he's even going to play in the bowl game. I have no idea if he will or won't. I don't really care about personal records. I think, to me, the more realistic one is Sam Hartman moving up to number 3 all time in passing touchdowns, because he needs 3. Against this pass defense, you should definitely be able to do that. But I'm not forcing it. I'm not forcing that type of thing with him. I just want to see them go out there and run their offense. But if I had to pick between the two, I think the more realistic one is Sam Hartman getting to third all time in passing touchdowns. But I'm not calling my game to do that. I may do some things early to make a statement about Audric, but I'm not chasing the all-time rushing record. The odds of him getting to that are very slim, in my opinion. Now, if he goes out and runs for 335 yards in this game, great. If he goes out and runs for 250 and decides he wants to play in the bowl game to set the season record, fine. That's fine. I mean, it is what it is. I don't really care a whole lot about that, to be honest with you. So I think the more realistic one is the Sam Hartman one. And then we had another super chat from Walk On Carry Off. Grateful for IB. I'm grateful for you as well. Truly. I love this community. I really do. Just some of the chats, some of the things you guys are chatting about during the show. I'm almost like, man, I want to stop talking about this because I want to jump into what they're talking about here in the chat. So you guys are doing really well. So I'm going to be back here in a couple minutes. Going to take a little brief intermission. Get ready for some recruiting talk. We're going to talk about the 2025 secondary class here coming up. So you're definitely going to be ready for that. So I'll be back in about 2 minutes. Enjoy your time. Keep chatting. Go sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Hit that like button while you're waiting, subscribe button, notification bell. And I will be back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, back for part three, final part of today's midweek rundown. Going to talk a little recruiting, and we're going to do a lot more of this as we get into the off season. And I'm going to look at the secondary class, and a couple reasons for that. Number one is Ryan's going to have an interview with one of the top targets in the secondary class on Friday, and Notre Dame just got a commitment from a secondary player. And so I'm gonna dive into those topics and discuss sort of what I want to see in that class, and what, not what I want to see, but what I like about that class, and the importance of that class. Number one, Notre Dame has upped their secondary recruiting in a big way in recent seasons, beginning at cornerback. From the minute Mike Mickens has arrived, I mean, his first cornerback class was a good class. It isn't quite panned out in some areas. Philip Riley didn't pan out. Ryan Barnes has dealt with some things, and he hasn't quite panned out. Chance Tucker's been a solid player. I mean, if Chance Tucker wasn't dealing with some really talented younger players, he could play for Notre Dame. He's a good football player. Ryan Barnes, same kind of deal. And you come out the next year, you even better corner class. You get Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey. You follow that up with Christian Gray and Micah Bell. You follow that up with Leonard Moore, who I think is an outstanding player. Carson Hobbs, had a really nice senior season. He's a guy that brings some ability. So cornerback recruiting has really taken a step up, and they're in a position now where they can just kind of pick who they want. There's not a need thing anymore. They do want a third cornerback in this class, in this 2025 class, because you have had two, and two the last 3 years, and I think there's, with them wanting to kind of have some corners that can play nickel as well as some safeties that can play nickel. I think they'd prefer corners that can play nickel, to be completely honest with you. If you can find like a bigger, stronger corner to play that position, that's why I want Jaden Mickey to move there so bad. I really want Jaden Mickey to move there. But there's some players that can play that, and so I just think the numbers wise, I think this is the year they'd really like a third corner, and so I fully expect them to pursue three corners in this class. And and there's also, I think, when you have a little bit more depth at corner, you can do different types of nickels. You can have a bigger nickel, like a Thomas Harper type, like a Clarence Lewis type, a Cree Thomas type guy like that, or a cover safety like an Ivan Taylor if you're able to land him. You also could have more of a pure cover corners when you're playing teams like Ohio State. That's like a Devin Williams type of guy. It's another reason I think Jaden Mickey would fit really well there in that particular look. So 3 is the number that Notre Dame is shooting for at corner in this class. They've already got one in Cree Thomas. Cree Thomas is a kid I like a lot. I know Ryan talked about him. We're going to just watch a little bit of film of some of these guys as I'm talking, not all of them. But Cree Thomas is interesting, and I know there's a lot of stuff about, well, he's a teammate of Benjamin Morrison and those type of things, and that's why they're going after him. I think that's just more coincidence. I don't think in any way, shape, form, or fashion that Notre Dame is recruiting Cree Thomas because he's a teammate of Benjamin Morrison. This is a guy that I've been told by sources Mike Mickens fell in love with very early on. Why? Number one, big, tall, long kid. A lot of things that he liked about Benjamin Morrison, he does like about Cree Thomas, I believe. Longer kid, instinctive, smooth, fluid. He's a different type of athlete than Benjamin, but a lot of the intangibles are similar to what Benjamin had: work ethic, football IQ, ball skills, physical for his size and his age. And then, so to the point where this past year, as you're seeing, all these highlights from Cree Thomas are of him playing safety, because out of necessity, they moved him to safety as a junior at Brophy Prep in Phoenix. And so there's a lot to like about him. I think he's a guy that one thing I really like about Cree is I think he's a very young looking athlete. I think he's a guy that's going to get to college and see a jump in speed. I think he's a guy that also is going to kind of fill out that frame really nicely. And he's a guy that I believe has the potential to play all five positions in the secondary: field corner, boundary corner, nickel corner, safety, field safety, boundary safety. He's better at some than others. I think as a pure corner, I like him better as the field corner, where he can kind of drive downhill, tackle, be rangy, do a lot of things that Cam Hart can do. I think he can play boundary. I think boundaries would definitely not be my number one corner spot for him. I just don't know if he has quite the long speed necessary to be a really dynamic boundary corner the way that Benjamin Morrison can be, and the way that I believe Christian Gray can be. But I like a lot about what Cree Thomas brings to the table. He's also a willing hitter. which is something that I like as well. He's not a thumper, but he's a willing hitter. He's a solid tackler, as you can see there. He's got a lot of natural strength. I graded Cree Thomas as a 4-star player. I know that he's a 3-star. We've been down this road before. I like the kid. I think he brings a lot of traits to the table. And the fact that you have a kid that has a starting caliber player at a place like Notre Dame at a safety and corner, or I should say corner and safety, because corners where Notre Dame likes him most. It's invaluable. Guys like that are invaluable. And that's where one of just the many things I like about Cree Thomas. So I really like that pickup. I know Wisconsin pushed for him hard. Oregon was on him for a little bit, but Wisconsin really tried to make a hard run at him. And Notre Dame beat the Badgers for him. So really like the pickup of Cree Thomas. Think he brings a lot to the table. So then you look at, okay, what's next at cornerback for Notre Dame? As I mentioned, they'd like to get 3 corners in this class. And right now there are 3 guys on the board. And I think Notre Dame's in a situation where you give me 2 of those 3, and I feel very good about where Notre Dame is in the 2023-25 class. The guy I want to begin with first and foremost, I'm going to talk about an in-state kid. That would be Mark Zachary. I've come to really like Mark Zachary quite a bit as a player. He's one of those guys that was like sort of a grow on me type of guy. I wasn't necessarily blown away by him initially. I liked his film initially, but it wasn't just like when I watched Benjamin Morrison's film, I was just like, wow, this guy's special. This guy's got some really big time ability. It was more about, yes, he's a good football player. And then just the more you watch him, you're like, there's something to this kid that maybe I didn't appreciate or recognize effectively enough at the beginning as well. And came out as a junior, got a little bit stronger, got faster. He's very dynamic. He was a big play guy on both sides of the ball. He's got a body type that reminds me a lot of Benjamin Morrison physically. He's like in the Christian Gray, Benjamin Morrison frame type of player, which you obviously like. And he's a guy that's got some instincts. He plays a lot of press coverage. He's a very patient guy. He's got to work on his transitions. They can be a little stiff at times, but I think that's more of a footwork thing. But he's a very instinctive cornerback, moves very well at the position, and he's an in-state kid, right? And when you look at him, he's got an Ohio State offer. He's got a Georgia offer. He's got a Michigan offer. There's a reason for that. And, 247 ranks him as a top 100 player. Rivals ranks him as a top 200 player. I definitely think he's a top 150 player. I've not graded his junior film yet, so I'm still going off sophomore film, and on sophomore film, he was in that top 150 range for me. So there's a lot to like about Mark Zachary. He's a guy that I know. He's another guy that from very early on, I was told Mike Mickens was very high on this kid. Just reminded a lot of the kids he'd get at Cincinnati. He wasn't ranked super high at the time, but just a football player, man. Just a smart, instinctive, tough football player that was smooth and fluid and just had a high football IQ. And I do believe that the Notre Dame staff views him as a guy that's got another gear in him when you get him into the college strength program. So Mark Zachary is definitely a guy that is a priority recruit for the Notre Dame coaching staff at cornerback. So he's one that you could see him kind of really making a push, them making a push for him to try to seal that deal sooner rather than later. But they've got to close because there's other big time schools after him. Third cornerback that I want to talk about, the next cornerback I want to talk about is Devin Williams. He's another player that Notre Dame likes a lot. He is a slot cornerback, or projects as a slot cornerback, could also play field cornerback from Buford, Georgia. Very talented player. One of the more smooth players you're going to see in this class. He's not the biggest guy. When you look at Devin Williams, you're like, man, that's just not a real big guy. He's like he's listed 5'11". I don't think he's 5'11". He's maybe 5'10", 5'10 and a half. He's 165 pounds, but there's a reason Bama and Auburn and Tennessee and Florida State and Notre Dame have all offered Devin Williams. He is a really, really talented cover guy. Very fluid, very smooth, instinctive, physical for his size, more than willing tackler, can really run. He can really run. But when you watch Devin Williams at first, you may not, depending on what your prowess is as a film evaluator, you may not see how fast he is at first because he's so smooth. Like he's not one of those like really like Micah Bell's like explosive. It's like boom, like as soon as he moves, there's like a suddenness to it. Devin Williams is more of that real smooth, fast guy. where you're like, that guy's not doesn't look like he's really running that hard, but he's like step for step with that 4-4 guy. What's up with that? Because he's just so smooth. Everything is easy, physically easy for Devin Williams. So he's another talented player that Notre Dame really likes, and a guy that I really like as well. He projects more as, like I said, a nickel corner to me. I think that's a fit for him. And when I say nickel corner is not a rotation player. As we found out this year with Thomas Harper and last year with Tariq Bracy, it's basically a starter. But he's not just a nickel. Now, he's going to have to get stronger to kind of play the field position or the boundary position, but he's got some ability to play those positions, no doubt about it, especially the field position where you can kind of protect his size a little bit with some safety help and some different things, but he's a really good football player. Now, I think Devin Williams is going to be hard to get out of South, but he likes Notre Dame a lot. He's made 2 trips up to Notre Dame, I believe. Loves Mike Mickens. Absolutely loves Mike Mickens. The only reason Notre Dame is even in this one is because the kid loves Mike Mickens, and Mike Mickens has done a great job. So he's another player that I look at and say he's a guy to keep an eye on. So that is corner number 2 of the uncommitted players. And then the third guy, this is one of my favorite players in the class. I'm just going to be honest with you. That I'm going to talk next about Dallas Golden. And I don't know how many of you have seen Dallas Golden play, but this kid is an outstanding football player. Dallas Golden is a kid, in my opinion, at the next level, could be a Power 5 player at corner, at nickel, at safety, at running back, as a slot running back, or as a wide receiver. This kid is one of the best pure football players in the entire country. His ranking profile is good. It's not where it should be, in my opinion. He's ranked in the top 100 by On3 and 247 Sports. He's ranked number 149 by ESPN. Rivals has him as an unranked 4-star recruit. This, to me, is a top 50 football player, in my opinion. I think Dallas Golden is an absolute stud. Good size, 5'11", 180, 185. He's a combination of explosive and smooth. He does a little bit of both. You see him there. Look at the patience he shows on that play. He is not fooled at all by the fake that they're trying to do to him. He's just a really smart, heady player. Work on your footwork. Just a smart, heady player. Sniffs it all out. Just a really instinctive football player, but he's athletic. He's physical. He's just I love guys that are two-way players. I've told you all this before. He plays at Berkeley Prep in Tampa. Kid is just, to me, just a special talent. I mean, you see a lot of highlights on offense. He plays receiver. He plays running back. He plays quarterback. It's like wildcat type quarterback. But he does a little bit of everything. But I just love the athleticism. Just a really dynamic football player, in my opinion. Good body control, great hips. This is against Tampa Plant. He can run. He's physical. I mean, honestly, guys, I mean, you remember how fired up I was about Benjamin Morrison. I don't know that Dallas Golden is quite the pure corner that Benjamin Morrison is. He's still got a lot to learn as a pure corner, but just as far as potential, he's got a big-time ability. And again, he could be a nickel. He could be a field guy. He's got boundary potential. He could play safety. He can return kicks. I mean, this kid can do a lot of things. And I know he likes Notre Dame a lot. I don't know quite where Notre Dame is right now. I'd say if he was to, or at least a top 5, I would fully expect Notre Dame to be in it. I would argue that Notre Dame would probably even be in his top 3 at this point in time. But it's going to be, you got to close. There's a lot of work to be done. There he's playing around. Look at that juke move. I mean, that's just an instinctive football player. I mean, yes, it's like that. I mean, just the explosiveness, the burst. That guy's a really, really good football player. So Dallas Golden is another one of my absolute favorites in this class. Absolutely love him as a football player. I like him at corner. I know some teams are looking at him as a safety. I know Notre Dame likes him as a corner, but you can't dismiss the fact that this kid can be a starter at multiple positions. I mean, and if down the road in 3 or 4 years, your starting safeties are him and Ivan Taylor, you've got one of the best cover tandems in the country at safety. But I still like him as a corner. I really do. I just look at those feet. Isn't that Sean Sevillano that he just made that move on? I could be wrong on it. No, he's not 52. But really love what Dallas Golden brings to the table. So you guys had a chance to watch him. It's a really, really good football player. That's it for the course. I'm going to break down. Somebody mentioned Kevin Humes. Right now, I think with Creed Thomas in the class, I don't know that Kevin Humes is as big of a priority for Notre Dame now. I think their focus is now, from what I understand, their focus is now on Mark Zachary, uh, Devin Williams, and Dallas Golden. I think that's where Notre Dame's focus is going to be right now, and trying to get two of those guys. And that's where you get two of those three guys, and you're set. You're loaded. I mean, that could end up being the best cornerback class they've had so far, because you have that third player. If you get a Dallas Golden and a Creed Thomas, that's an excellent corner class as a 1-2. If you get Devin Williams and Creed Thomas, same thing. If you get Mark Zachary and Creed Thomas, it's a really good corner tandem. But if you can get three, if you can get two of those three left to go with Creed Thomas, you've got a truly special cornerback class, in my opinion. And now you've stacked them up 4 years in a row of really good cornerback classes. And so I'm excited to see what this group, and you want to talk about just how fast this stuff is. Think about this. This 25 class, when they show up, Benjamin Morrison's probably gone. And it just, what something Brandon just said made me think of that. But Benjamin Morrison's probably in the NFL or going into the draft when this class shows up. So it's going to be good to have that influx of talent after you lose Cam Hart this year, potentially lose Benjamin Morrison next year. It'd be really nice to have that three-man influx of talent if you can get two of those three guys. Really, really, really need to get two of those three guys. My personal preference is Dallas Golden and one of the other two. That's my personal preference, because I think that I think he's a really, really talented player. But we just got to see kind of how it all plays out right now. Hold on a second. That's where with corner. That's where Notre Dame is with corner class right now. I'm going to move over to the safety class. Ryan is going to be interviewing Ivan Taylor here in a couple days. Notre Dame safety class right now, needs wise, we'll have, hopefully we're going to try to get Jadon Blair on the show at some point in time. Ethan Long's another player that Ryan has interviewed. Really good kids. Those are really the three right now. Let's talk needs. Right now, Notre Dame's desired safety in this class right for now is 2. Reason for that is you have 3 in the 2024 class with Bronte Johnson, Kennedy Urlacher, who the staff likes a lot, and then Tabron Benny Powell. And then also in the 23 class, you've got to remember they only signed 2 in Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick, but they also have Luke Talich, and it's looking like he might actually stay at safety for a little bit, maybe permanently, because of how well he runs and moves. And so you've got him in that class as well. And he's already starting on special teams for Notre Dame as a true freshman. So, Luke Talich whether he goes on scholarship or not, I don't know. I'd be shocked if over the next couple of years he's not on scholarship. But how he's viewed by the Notre Dame staff, from what I'm told from my sources, they view him as a scholarship player as far as his development, his potential, how he fits into the depth chart, things along those lines. So they view that as a 3-man safety class. Then you have a 3-man safety class in the 2024 class. So at safety in the 2025 class, right now it's 2. Now that could grow depending on how things happen on the current roster. But with guys like Creed Thomas and Dallas Golden and their potential to play safety if the need is there, I think right now 2 is going to be the number, barring some changes to unexpected changes to the current roster. So there's 3 guys on the board. And essentially, Notre Dame's going to take the first 2 of them that want to commit. I've asked this question of people constantly, and there's, they like all 3 of them. And it's like there's one guy that I think is the top of the board. There's another guy that's like right below him. But then the third guy is like kind of like right below him. So they're kind of all in that A group. And I won't say who those guys are. But it's just the point where it's close enough to where all 3 of them are guys that they like. So right now, the goal is to target 2 of those 3. And if there are some changes to the current roster and some makeup of some other positions, then you could maybe see them expand to 3 at some point in time. But right now, the goal is 2. So we're going to break down those 3 kids. As I said, it's Ivan Taylor from Florida. You've got Jadon Blair from North Carolina, and then Ethan Long from Connecticut. The first player I want to talk about is Ivan Taylor, because Ryan's got a story that we're going to publish about him tomorrow. He interviewed him today. We're going to play that interview on Friday. Ivan has been at Notre Dame's last 2 home games. He has talked about making a decision after the season. Notre Dame's obviously in the running there. They've done a great job with Ivan Taylor so far. They just got to close, right? That's going to be the key. But let's talk a little bit about Ivan Taylor. I think the first thing that stands out to me in regard to what Ivan Taylor brings to the table is he's almost kind of like a big corner. If Notre Dame was running Clark Lee's defense, or if Notre Dame was running, especially if Notre Dame was running Bob Diaco's defense, I would strongly consider having Ivan Taylor being a field corner. I think he covers that well for his position. I do not believe he's a outside cornerback in the Notre Dame defense because I don't think he's like a pure man guy. And those other teams we talked about, they were more, quarters, cover two, zone type of situations. And Ivan Taylor could have played that at a very high level. I think he's a good enough cover player to be the nickel, a Thomas Harper type of guy as a nickel. I do think he brings that kind of coverage ability to the table. I don't, however, want to see him be the nickel because I really think having a cover player in the back end of the safety position that can cover people, can play with great range, that can get to the football gives you tremendous benefit. And if you want an example, look at Xavier Watts. I mean, that's the role that I see Ivan Taylor fitting into at Notre Dame if they're able to land him in their class. You're talking about a guy that covers a lot of ground, a guy that's very rangy, very smooth and fluid, has some twitchiness to him, but he's also a high football IQ player. And one of the things I loved about Xavier Watts is I praised him, and one of the reasons I loved him coming out and why he was one of the top kids in the class, because I was like, guys, this is a kid that start for you on both sides of the ball, right? This is a guy that brings a lot of versatility. He's a football player. He's a smart football player on top of being athletic. Well, Ivan Taylor's not a two-way player, as far as I know. I don't remember seeing any film of him playing on offense. However, the point that I'm making is the instincts, the feel for the game, the football IQ, all those things are that of just a great football player, not just a one trick, I do this type of guy. Very, very smart football player, but he's also an athletic player. Obviously, the DNA is there. Dad played in the NFL, but he's a rangy guy. He's not the biggest kid in the world, but he's a more than willing hitter, as you see from a lot of these highlights. And as he gets into college and gets stronger, his ability to be a hitter like Xavier Watts is going to only increase. But you talk about losing a guy like Xavier Watts. I love that read, react, and drive. Talk about losing a guy like Xavier Watts. And how do you replace a guy like Xavier Watts? This is exactly how you do it. Now, Ivan's not going to be here for a couple of years, but I'm talking about replacing this type of player in the offense, a guy that can play over the top, but more so a guy that's just going to drive on routes, a guy that can play man coverage, a guy that can come down and if you're going to go cover one, you say, hey, put him on the slot, put him on the tight end, put him on the back out of the backfield, and you feel like you have a guy that can flat out and go out and cover those guys. And they just don't have a lot of that on the roster, to be honest with you. They have a lot of true safeties that are more, rangy thumpers, downhill guys. There's not a lot of guys who can play over the top and play in the slot and those type of things. I think that Don Schuler has shown me some of that in limited snaps. I think Bronte Johnson could be kind of some of that. But a lot of the other guys, Ben Minnick and Kennedy Urlacher, they're more pure alley safeties, middle of field safeties, can do different things, but they're not guys you're going to be bringing down and playing in a ton of man coverage. And Ivan Taylor, to me, can be that guy. He can be the kind of guy that can come down and not only play in the alleys, but can also cover. I mean, literally be cover one. As we all saw, guys, Notre Dame loves playing man coverage. And yes, that's what Al Golden likes to do, but that's what Marcus Freeman likes to do. So if Al Golden leaves, guess what? The defense isn't going to change much. It's still, at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman's philosophy. And Marcus Freeman likes guys that can cover. Go look at his Cincinnati defenses. Look at his Notre Dame defenses. You need guys that can cover. And Ivan Taylor is, in my opinion, the best pure cover safety that Notre Dame is recruiting. And his ability in coverage is why I think he's a top 50 recruit. You look at the recruiting rankings for Ivan Taylor. He's ranked as the number 35 player in the country by 247 Sports. He's ranked as the number 30 player in the country by ESPN. On3 and Rivals have him in the top 200. I think he's definitely a top 100 guy for me. I'd probably hold off and say, let me just see a little bit more from senior film to put him in the top 50. But the talent is there for by the time he's done to be a top 50 football player. And I got to watch the rest of the class, but he could end up being a top 50 guy. I haven't graded him yet, but that's just kind of my gut feel. He's a borderline top 50 overall national recruit, which is really good and something that they can bring to the table. It's just kid's a heck of a football player. And, again, the DNA is there. The instincts are there, the IQ is there, just everything you want. And then he's a Florida kid. That's another part of it, right? Is no having the ability to go down and get to Florida and get a big time skill player would be huge. Would be absolutely huge. And look, you always worry about kids flipping. I worry about every kid potentially flipping. But he's the kind of kid when you think about his background, Ryan's going to have some very interesting stuff to talk about his background down the road and where his interest in Notre Dame came from and all that kind of stuff. But when you know his family and different things about him and his character, whether it's talking to, you know, coaches around the business, whether it's talking to Brian Smith, who's gotten to know him a little bit, you talk to Ryan, who's gotten to know him, you're like, this is a really interesting kid. This is a Notre Dame kid. This is a kid that you're like, now you understand why he likes Notre Dame so much, because he's just a different kind of cat. He's smart, he's thoughtful. Academics matter to him, but also being a great football player matters to him. And he's one of those kids that says, "Hey, I can be a great student and a great football player and do all of it." And Ivan Taylor certainly fits that mold. Just watch a couple more clips here before I move on to the last couple guys. Yeah, he's a really good football player. All right, let's talk about the next safety on the board. Love Ivan Taylor. I'll tell you the guy that I think has the highest safety, the highest ceiling of any safety on the board for me is Jadon Blair. Love this kid's film. Now he's a bit more raw. He's going to need a little bit more work, in my opinion. You know, technically, because he's kind of long and you know he's going to have to get more physical, a little bit more not physical, stronger. There's just a lot more work there with him, but the talent is outstanding, in my opinion. You're talking about a long, rangy kid that can play center field, that can come down the alleys. I mean, a lot of people are going to compare him to Kyle Hamilton. I think they're a little different, in my opinion. But the height is there, and you know, boy, there's a lot to like about this kid. I view this kid as if Notre Dame just wants to play cover one and have this kid playing center field and let him roam center field, I think he's going to be super disruptive because he covers a lot of ground. I don't know what his 40 time is, but remember Kyle Hamilton had uh, very shaky 40 time as well, but just covered a lot of ground. Like that play right there is exactly what I'm talking about. Like it doesn't look like he's running fast just because he's so long, but just look how much ground he covers in a hurry. He just beats other guys to the football that are closer than he was when they took all the football. That's just a rangy kid, and he arrives with a lot of force. I saw Brandon's comment about iffy on the film. The sophomore film, I'm with you on, Brandon. The junior film was really, really good. He took a big jump, as my opinion, as a junior. Just a really rangy kid, willing hitter, smart player, gets his hands on the football a ton. I think he was named the defensive player in his league, which means there's production there. This kid's got a lot of ability, and he was very much a low floor, high ceiling guy as a sophomore. I think his ceiling for me took a big jump as a junior. And that's one of the things that Brandon, to me, made him jump up for me, is because I saw a kid who's a little more fluid as a junior. I see a kid that's more instinctive as a junior. I see a kid that's stronger at the football as a junior, and a kid whose overall game just took a big jump. And I mean, you're watching the junior film here now, Brandon, and I'm telling you, man, this kid's really good football player. For me, this is just my opinion. I don't know what Notre Dame's stance is, but to me, Jadon Blair's a take him no matter what guy. Let's just say hypothetically that Ivan Taylor and Ethan Long commit to Notre Dame before Jadon Blair, and you're saying, hey, 2 is the number. I'm still taking Jadon Blair. Jadon Blair and Ivan Taylor are commit no matter what guys. And I like Ethan Long. He's a good football player. But to me, these 2 guys just have higher ceilings, in my opinion. Ethan Long has a much higher floor, but I think Jadon has a much higher ceiling, as you can see here. I mean, just I like how low he gets too. Like he plays with good pad level for a 6'4" kid, because he's very, very tall. But uh, love the ability, and you can see that he's going to get his hands on balls that other kids just can't get his hands on, because he doesn't have to be quite as in good a position of coverage because he's so tall. We see this with Cam Hart. You know that the not just the height, but the length. He's got long arms. He's got a huge radius, and he's very his ability to get to the football, as I said, is very, very impressive. So Jadon Blair, now he's another interesting guy. Likes Notre Dame a lot. He's been up to Notre Dame quite a bit, but I don't believe he's necessarily in decision-making mode. His ranking is all over the place. On3 has the number 28 player in the country. 247 has the number 179. ESPN has him number 296. I haven't graded him. My gut, as a junior, I graded, or sophomore, I graded him. He was a top 150 guy, very close to being a top 100 guy just because of the tools. But a lot of the rawness of him was kind of why I had him down below a little bit. But his junior film to me really jumped him up to where I'll be shocked if he's not a top 100 guy when I grade him again. He took a big jump for me. He was one of my biggest risers in the class. Really, really like what I've seen from Jadon Blair in this class. And now, again, Florida State's after him. Penn State's after him. There's a lot of LSU has offered him. And his offer list to me is only going to grow. My hope is that Notre Dame can close on him. I think he likes Notre Dame a lot. I think his dad likes Notre Dame a lot, but I also think he likes other schools. And Notre Dame's going to have to, kind of convince him of the vision of like the ideal scenario to me. And again, I'd take all three of them if I could. Personally, I would take three safeties. I would take Ethan Long as well. But if I'm Notre Dame, I'm selling Jadon Blair on the vision of, listen, we've got Ivan Taylor. If you can get Ivan, this is our dream class is you and Ivan, because Ivan's can play the slot. He can cover. He can play the alleys. He can play a lot of man coverage. You can do all those things as well. But man, we have not had an impact center fielder on the defense that can just be rangy and pick off passes and get pass breakups and then come downhill when you're in 4 down. We haven't had that guy, and you can be that guy, and we need that kind of guy. And that would be my sales pitch to Jadon Blair, and how him and Ivan Taylor are really different players. They're very different players. And I think he's a guy that has a chance to, kind of come in and be a very unique player for Notre Dame. And I would sell him on that. Like, you guys are a great compliment. Like, if we could land both of you guys somehow, we're going to come in and be a very dynamic football team and a very impactful football team in the secondary. And, we can do a lot of different things with you. I wouldn't necessarily pitch him on using him like Kyle Hamilton, because I think that they're a little different. And where Kyle Hamilton was more a pure rangy alley guy, I think Jadon can play center field and just play cover one, and you think you're throwing an outside go route. Next thing you know, like, how the heck did he get from there to there and pick that pass off? Those are all things that I think he can absolutely do and play at a high level. Last guy I'm going to talk about is Ethan Long. Ethan Long's another player that I like a lot. He's a little bit different than those other guys. He's actually seen his ranking jump up a little bit this year. Rivals recently jumped him up as a 4-star. They ranked him as a number 158 player in the country. On3 and 247 still have him as a 3-star. I think he is a 4-star football player. I like Ethan Long. I think he's got good size. He's instinctive. He's smooth. He's not a real explosive guy. He's not a guy to me that's going to come in and run like a 4.3, low 4.4. But he's a kid that's a better athlete. He's more smooth than he is explosive. But the thing about Ethan Long that you have to understand is whatever he might lack in just pure raw speed, he makes up for as being one of the most instinctive, disruptive playmaking cornerbacks that you're going to find in the class. I mean, in high school, people just do not throw at him. It's just, it's crazy how much people avoid him. And when he's still able to put up the numbers he's been able to put up, even with people just avoiding him, a kid's a good football player. And I think his ceiling isn't quite as high as the other two kids, Ivan Taylor and Jadon Blair, but his floor might be as high as Ivan Taylor's. I really think it could be. He's got that kind of feel. He's a kid that, to me, as long as he can fill out the next couple of years, has the football IQ and the overall athletic package to come in and help you out right away. And that's the thing I love about this safety group that I'm talking about. I think all of them have the tools that over the next year and a half can be guys who can come in and compete early for playing time. I think Jadon Blair, if he continues to fill out like I think he will, can be a guy that can help out right away. And then Ivan Taylor definitely can be a guy that could come out and potentially help out right away. So Really love that three-man group. I believe Notre Dame is going to target two of those three right now, which kind of puts a little bit of pressure on those guys. Like, if you want to be at Notre Dame, you better jump on board and get on board, because there may not be enough room at the end, so to speak, if they don't get there. So that, everybody, is going to be it for the breakdown of the 2025 safety DB class. Look, Brian Smith has talked about this in the past. I believe this. I've talked about this in the past. If you want to be a truly elite defense, you need to have a great secondary. And just perfect example, look at this year's Notre Dame defense. This is not the best defensive line Notre Dame has had in the last 10 years. It's not even the top three of defensive lines that Notre Dame has had. They're not great sackers. They're not real super disruptive with a bunch of tackles for loss. They're not in the same league, in my opinion, as like the 2018 defensive line, or the 2012 defensive line, or the 2015 defensive line, or honestly, even the 2021 defensive line that had Foskey was so good, and Jason Adamiola had a good year, and you had his brother, and you had Kurt Heinisch had a really good year. You had Myron Howard Cross was part of the rotation. Riley Mills was part of the rotation. Jordan Patojo was part of the rotation. Nana was part of the rotation. You had a really deep group. And this group is good, but not like a dominant group. The linebacking core is good, but it's not a dominant group. It's not as good as the 2018 linebacking core, even the 2017 linebacking core. It's not as good, as my opinion, as the 2012 or even the 2014 linebacker core before you had all the injuries to Joe Schmidt, but the 2012 linebacking core. But what's different, and what makes this arguably the best defense Notre Dame has had in the last 15, 20 years, arguably, got to see how they finish. But the reason why it's definitely better than 20, definitely better than 19, definitely better than 18, and don't even get me started on 15. Why I think it's the best than 2012, at least has a chance to be, is because of the secondary. When you have an elite secondary that can lock people down, I've never seen a secondary impact the front seven as much as this Notre Dame secondary has. I haven't. You can't always rely on that, but if you can put an elite secondary on the field consistently, you're going to have an elite defense. And that's what Notre Dame is building. You're going to lose Cam Hart after this year. You're going to lose DJ Brown. You're going to lose Xavier Watts either this year or next year. He's gone after one of the next two. You've got some young guys coming in. You've got obviously Christian Gray and Micah Bell and Jaden Mickey and Leonard Moore's coming in, and you've got Cree Thomas committed. You've got Bronte Johnson and Kennedy Urlacher and Tabron Benny Powell coming in. I love what I've seen from Adon Schuler so far. Ben Minnick played on Saturday, so he's clearly healthy. But this 25 class to me is the class that's going to kind of come in after a bunch of those kids are gone. Cam's going to be gone. Benjamin Morse is probably going to be gone. Xavier Watts is going to be gone. DJ Brown's going to be gone. Jaden Mickey might be gone probably gone a year after these guys leave. He'll be gone. They may only be on campus with Christian Gray for a year. If you think about it, when these kids show up, Christian Gray is going to be a junior. Would any of you be shocked if Christian Gray is so good in 2025 that he leaves as a true junior, go to the NFL either? I won't be. So it's so important that 25 class be elite, so that and have guys that can come in and play now, because you are going to lose a lot of talent in the second and the next couple of years, and you've got to make sure that you're recruiting it with even as good or even better players. And I believe that this 25 secondary class has a chance to be really, really special. If they land any of the kids that I just broke down today, that's a really big pickup. If they can land three of the corners I talked about, especially if Dallas Golden is one of them, if you get Ivan Taylor and Jadon Blair, that's big time. But if you throw Ethan Long in there, that's also really good. So to me, it's got a chance to be special, but you got to close. That's the key. You've got to close on those players. You've got to close on Ivan Taylor. You've got to close on Dallas Golden. You've got to close on Mark Zachary. You've got to close on Devin Williams. You've got to close on Jadon Blair. And they're in a great position now, but they haven't closed on those guys the way that they need to, or at least enough of them yet. But the chance is there for them to do it. And it's a big year for Chris O'Leary. For Mike Mickens, it's like, dude, just keep doing what you're doing and you'll be fine. But for Chris O'Leary, it's really important for him to close. And Chad Bowden is like it's amazing how much these kids at safety and cornerback talk about him, especially the safety kids talk about him. and the role that he's doing. And Marcus Freeman's doing a lot as well with this group. So really chance to close. Love this secondary class, but it's important. They need it. And it's not just about breaking it down just to break it down or just because Cree committed. This is such an incredibly important part of the 25 class, because when you think about how much of the talent they're going to be losing from the current roster, by the time these kids are freshmen and sophomores, most of the current secondary is going to be gone. That's how crazy this whole thing is. It's going to be gone. And that's the kind of the DB class that can say, we're not only going to just keep it going, we're going to be even better. And that's what Notre Dame has a chance to build. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you've not done so, it's Thanksgiving present to me. If you haven't done so, it's to sign up for the message boards at boards@irishbreakdown.com. Check out all of our free content at irishbreakdown.com. If I don't talk to you all again, have a wonderful, safe, happy Thanksgiving. I know for me, I'm thankful for all the things God is doing in my life right now and my family's life right now, but I'm also incredibly thankful for you all. I truly am. I'm not just saying that because it's Thanksgiving or I want you to sign up. I mean, I do want all those things, but I truly am blessed. And to have such a great group of people day before Thanksgiving, we got a couple hundred people in the chat, in the show watching and just engaged. And I just really appreciate y'all very, very much. And I look forward to everything that we've got coming. But have a great day tomorrow. Enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday. Enjoy being around your family. And just remember to be thankful for all the things that we have, because we are still truly a very blessed people. And I know I'm very blessed. And but also know that if you are going through a tough time, that there is a community out here. It's called IB Nation. That is there for you. Just reach out, ask for prayer. We do that prayer requests on the board all the time. We do them in the show all the time. Because you are truly cared for and you are truly appreciated and loved by me, my team, my family. We are so appreciative of what you guys are. So have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you all for being with this IB community. And we'll be back for a live show on Friday, 1:00. Ryan and I are going to do our Keys to Victory. We are going to do our prediction show Saturday. We're going to go live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have a live show during the Stanford game. So you definitely want to check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. We'll talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.